Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, August 28th, 2023. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Richard Kahlenberg, education and housing policy consultant and non-resident fellow at the Georgetown University, on his new book, Excluded: How Snob Zoning, NIMBYism, and Class Bias Build the Walls We Don't See. Also on the program today, Trump and his co-defendants to be arraigned in Georgia in 1 week. So when they enter their pleas and hear their charges. Maybe more importantly, Trump's federal D.C. trial will start March 4th. For those of you keeping track, that is the day before Super Tuesday.
Whoopsie.
Poll shows one half of Americans say they want Trump to suspend his campaign. However, 77% of Americans say Biden is too old to be effective in office. 3 murdered in Jacksonville in a racist hate killing against black people. UAW brokers a tentative narrow agreement with GM battery maker. This now just about 16 days away from looming strike deadline. Speaking of unions, the National Labor Relations Board passes one of the most significant union empowerment rules perhaps in decades. It makes unionization all but inevitable if a majority of the workers in a shop simply file union affiliation cards. No labels will have a nominating convention in April. This, according to Joe Lieberman. And CPAC resignation brings more calls for a Matt Schlapp sexual misconduct investigation. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome back.
On the IM today, the first IM through the gates, the Majority Report with Emma Vigeland says the end of an era. Yes, there it is.
Very, very sad. Very sad.
Sad day.
But, you know, the authoritarian, the deep state, they can't have me broadcasting, so they had to bring Sam back.
Kowalski from Nebraska, IMs, welcome back, Sam. I have the Emma Majority Report assessment together as requested. Cursing was only up 28.3%.
I mean, yeah, that's fair, Kowalski.
Yeah.
I trust your tabulations.
The kids these days, in the way that they always got to work blue.
I've heard it's a sign of intelligence, so
The
cursing.
I was going to say, like, that's exactly like what Bill Cosby would tell those comedians following up. Don't work blue.
Oh, yeah.
Meanwhile, he's putting roofies into people's and drugging them.
So are you, you're filling a Bill Cosby role today? Is that what you want to say?
That's why I held off.
Okay. Many people are saying.
So we're back. That's not true.
Yep.
Defamation.
Okay.
We will incidentally.
Defamation cast.
Incidentally, that brings up a point. There was an IM that Emma read.
Yeah.
At the end of the show on Friday, during the fun half. I don't think it was a freebie Friday. I don't know. I don't know
No, it was
what
during the
goes
fun
on.
half. Yeah.
And the IMer was incorrect. and I have a call for I've been contacted for a retraction and a correction. I will give that in the fun half today. We'll discuss it. And then there's that misinformation was pretty straightforward, and we're going to correct that.
Good.
I want people to tune in, but I want to do it around the same time so that anybody who'd listened at that time would be more likely to hear it. I'm not going to bury it in the first half of the show. Also, I'm going to, Matt and I are going to have a debate on his words during that moment. And we're going to decide whether that needed to be a retraction as well.
Good. Good.
People can stick around for that if they want. Meanwhile, over the weekend,
He and I have to definitely debate. That's what I love.
we will get to that. We should say, just breaking right now, that story about when Trump's trial is going to be held in D.C. and the arraignment. Again, the arraignment is just you're going to watch all of them come in and basically, I think they have to be there, or maybe just their attorneys, and enter their plea. Although I'm not 100% sure if they all have to be there, enter their plea, and hear their charges. But let's get to this. Jacksonville, Florida, a gunman who ended up killing himself. But we know from his manifesto, this is according to the local sheriff, set out to kill black people and killed 2 shoppers and an employee at a dollar store in Jackson, Florida. It's being investigated as a hate crime. The sheriff came out and was pretty explicit.
I mean, he had apparently tried to go to a local HBCU beforehand, and was turned away by a security guard, and then he just went down to the dollar store.
He was wearing a shirt over a tactical vest, mask and gloves. And this, I guess the whole thing lasted about 11 minutes. Here is Jacksonville City Councilwoman Jacoby Pittman spoke with CNN.
This is a tragic moment. My heart is heavy, and I'm just tired seeing all the shootings. You know, we have 4 districts into one, and as a community, the mayor and I was just together on this past Thursday, and we want a solution. Our sheriff is doing the best that he can, but as an alignment and resources to the community, we got to keep working together. This right here today was a tragedy. And I understand, I think the young man who was doing the shooting, I think he has been killed. But the people in this community, they're hurting. And they have every right to. You know, this makes no sense. I am very, very angry right now. I'm emotional. You know, we got kids in this community seeing all of this. And this is unnecessary. You know, it's unjust that we can't even walk on the sidewalks. We're not safe in any stores. And I'm looking for opportunity. This community needs to come together.
Let's pull up. Do we have the I think it was the sheriff basically announcing what they had found about this guy.
I mean, the manifesto was well documented, and reportedly, a swastika was etched into the gun. So,
yeah,
it's pretty clear what happened.
Identified, Nazi. What's really amazing has been some of the Republican responses to this. We'll get to that later in the program.
But yeah, I mean, I don't want to hear much about mental health. This is a story about white supremacy.
I mean, look, those two things are not mutually exclusive, we should say.
Agreed.
But here, this sheriff puts it, I believe he's the sheriff. Yeah, he's the Jacksonville sheriff. Here it is, T.K. Walters.
Portions of these manifestos detail the shooter's disgusting ideology of hate. Plainly put, this shooting was racially motivated, and he hated black people. He wanted to kill niggers. That's the one and only time I'll use that word. I want to be very clear that there is absolutely no evidence that the shooter is part of any large group. We know that he acted completely alone. If you take a look at the images on the screen, you'll be able to see what he utilized. The weapons that the shooter used today are a Glock and an AR-15 style rifle. This is a dark day in Jacksonville's history. Any loss of life is tragic, but the hate that motivated the shooter's killing spree adds an additional layer of heartbreak. There's no place for hate in our community, and this is not Jacksonville. As a member of this Jacksonville community, I am sickened by this cowardly shooter's personal ideology of hate. Homicide detectives are actively investigating this tragedy, and despite the fact that the shooter is dead, they will continue to investigate this until we have a complete understanding of what happened and even why he did it.
At one point also, he says, the guy is clearly disturbed. But again, the fact that the guy is disturbed, we have a society, and presumably there's no reason to believe that we don't have a lot of societies where there are this type of disturbed people. But their access to guns, and on top of which, the idea that we don't have, we have the whole country was, racism has been here as long, if not longer than the country itself has existed. And the idea that we can just wish it away because, apparently there was a black president, or because you sometimes have black politicians. I mean,
Well, today is the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington, the I Have a Dream speech, and Saturday, the day that the shooting happened, the hate crime happened, was the National Day of Remembrance on that front. And it's just a stark reminder that this is so unfortunately enduring systemic racism, and it just underscores how important continued activism in the vein of what we saw on the March on Washington, how important that is.
Yeah, and we should say that that March on Washington was about jobs and freedom.
Yes, that's
and we're going to talk to Richard Kahlenberg in a moment, who has a very interesting perspective. He has written in the past about affirmative action. At one point, years and years ago, in law school, had felt that it was in legal jeopardy. I mean, we're talking 40 years ago, 40 some odd years ago, and has written extensively on other mechanisms to use based upon class or really geography as a means to both get racial and class diversity in universities, and broadly for benefits for society. And largely that's the theme of Excluded, how Snob Zoning, NIMBYism, and class bias builds the walls we don't see. We'll get to that in just a moment. First, got a new sponsor today. It's Trust and Will. You can find them at trustandwill.com/majority. I mean, one of the things I will say this, when I first had, God bless you.
Thank you.
When I first had, I never really thought about having a will when I was younger, really until I had kids, or maybe it was when I got married, but we got pregnant so quickly. And you don't really think about those things. And then when you think about them, you get intimidated because you have no idea what to do. That's basically how it went for me. And then if you actually sort of bust through that and say, I got to do this, then you're like, this is going to cost me an arm and a leg. I'm not going to do it. I am telling you right now, that's the beauty of a site like trust and will, because you can do this from the comfort of your own home. It is incredibly straightforward, and it is something that you really, really want to do. One, for your peace of mind, but really, the value of estate planning, which makes it sound, sort of intimidating, but the value of having a will or a trust, which is more or less like a will before you die. I mean, I should say like a one that, broadly speaking, it basically makes sure that whoever you're leaving whatever you have to doesn't have to go through a very, very complicated and protracted, probate process through court. Also, if you have kids, even if you have a pet or whatnot, and it's important to you who ends up taking care of these folks, the way you do it is through a will. And it also, if you have more assets, you have multiple kids or whatever it is, multiple siblings or parent, the way you avoid some type of like family messes. And the thing about, and I'm very hesitant to do any type of like services that are financial or whatnot. This is really something that everybody genuinely needs. And the beauty about trust and will is that it is incredibly highly rated. You can check any type of reviews, any type of sites that do this. They will give it incredibly high reviews. It has high reviews from all of the users. And I've gone through the process. I already had my will, but I went through it just to check it out. It is super easy. They ask you a series of questions that give a sense of like what's going to be important. And within moments and for really a reasonable amount of money, you can have your will essentially executed. They have live customer support. It's available through phone, chat, and email. They also allow you to upload some documents in a completely encrypted bank level encryption in terms of all your information. Like I say, thousands of 5-star reviews on Trustpilot. Hundreds of thousands of people have used it. Gain peace of mind today with Trust and Will. You get 10% off plus free shipping of your estate plan documents by visiting trustandwill.com/majority. That's 10% off and free shipping at trustandwill.com/majority. Honestly, do not put this off. If you're in a position where you have some assets and you don't have a will, I know if you're anything remotely like me, you've been putting it off. Don't put it off. Just go do it. It'll make you feel so much better. All right, quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking to Richard Kahlenberg, education and housing policy consultant and non-resident fellow at Georgetown University, author of Excluded, How Snob Zoning, NIMBYism, and Class Bias Build the Walls We Don't See. We'll be right back. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. I want to welcome back to the program education and housing policy consultant, non-resident fellow at Georgetown University, author of his most recent Excluded, How Snob Zoning, NIMBYism, and Class Bias Build the Walls We Don't See. Richard Kahlenberg, welcome back to the program.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Zoning, housing zoning sounds like the most dry topic possible. But it is incredibly important in the way that our society is structured. Let's just start, like, who is this book for in your mind?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll tell you, we struggled with the title. Do you put zoning in there? Because it does put people to sleep, but it's enormously important. It basically decides who gets to live where in America, which is enormously important because the neighborhoods we live in, all sorts of research suggests, have a huge impact on educational opportunities, access to transportation, access to jobs. So anyway, so we ended up putting it in the title just to explain to people what we were talking about. The audience is really a number of folks. I mean, I'm interested in public policy makers and journalists, but the general public, I think, if anything, my book is aimed at fellow liberals who I think don't realize that while they take the righteous position on not building a wall to Mexico, being welcoming to immigrants, also often live in upper middle class neighborhoods where there are walls, invisible walls, built around them. So, for example, a community might say, anyone's welcome to live here so long as you can afford a single family home that's detached and sometimes on half an acre lot. And that's routine in America. About 75% of the land in urban areas is dedicated to single families only. It's illegal to to build anything else, apartments or other things. So that's who I'm trying to reach, to basically make people more aware of the fact that they are part of a system which builds walls to exclude, and that they are real victims to this phenomenon.
There's sort of like in I think all of your work has centered around this sort of dynamic where both like class ends up being a proxy for race and race ends up being a proxy for class. And the idea being that, just give me your sense of like how that interplay works. Because, I mentioned before the break about your plans for addressing affirmative action before it even was limited by the Supreme Court. I mean, I know you wrote quite a bit about that, particularly during the Trump years when it was clear, where this was headed, and the idea of using geography on some level to both achieve racial diversity, but also class diversity.
That's right. And you can see behind me, other side, Bobby Kennedy, and my kind of going back to the 1968 campaign for president. He, brought together Black people, working class whites who now will tend to vote for people like Donald Trump, brought them together around common issues of class discrimination, class inequality. Kennedy realized that working class people of all races have a raw deal in American society. He was very attuned to racial inequality and was a strong supporter of civil rights, but at the same time said, well, we need to think beyond just Black and white and also think about some of the bigger structural economic issues that create unfairness in American society. And so that's kind of a through line in all my work. I mean, I was on years ago, Sam, you're not going to remember this, but
I do remember
about labor organizing as a civil right. And so the concept there was that it's wrong to discriminate based on race. It's also wrong to discriminate based on class and say that if someone just wants to join a union and join the middle class, that they ought to be discriminated against. I mean, the penalties are so weak right now if an employer fires someone for unionizing. That's true in the affirmative action area as well. I was deeply concerned that places like Harvard, on the one hand, did a great job of creating racial diversity, which I support. But on the other hand, they had, 15 times as many rich students as poor students. And so that's a way of addressing race, but not addressing fundamental issues of class. And in this book, I'm trying to make the same point. In American society, we have the Fair Housing Act, as we should. As a result, racial segregation between Black and white people has declined by about 30% since 1970. So that's the good news. It hasn't declined enough, but it's declined some. Meanwhile, our economic segregation is skyrocketing. It's basically doubled during that same period. People used to live in mixed income neighborhoods. Now it's much more common for poor people to live with other poor people, wealthy people live with other wealthy people. So throughout this work, I'm trying to raise consciousness about these class issues, in part because substantively, I think a lot of these issues are class-based, but also politically, that the best way to divide the Bobby Kennedy coalition of working class people of all races is to say we're only going to focus on race, and I think that's been a mistake.
Well, I want to come back to the political question for a little bit. Let's stay with just from a purely policy thing. One of the things I found that you write about is that once the Fair Housing Act was passed, which was 68, I think it was, there were spikes in local exclusionary zoning that sort of are akin in some ways to the 14th Amendment says you can't, or 13th with 15th Amendment you can't deny people the right to vote on based on race. And so all of a sudden poll taxes show up and literacy tests, because the way that people are going to exclude black people from having political power, they can see an association between being illiterate and having been a slave, because you're not going to learn there. What does that tell us about that? And then how is that morphed so that it almost like some of the vestiges are still there of the racial bias inherent in these things, but it's also been sort of like, to the extent that there's been any progress, it's a bias against working class people.
That's exactly right. So there were two big upticks in exclusionary zoning. So these policies that ban apartments and ban multifamily housing. The first came in the early 20th century. There was a terrible practice in many communities, Baltimore and elsewhere, where there was racial zoning. If you were black, you couldn't buy in certain neighborhoods by law. I mean, it was a horrendous set of policies. That was struck down by the Supreme Court. So communities figured out very quickly, well, if we ban multifamily housing, we will keep most black people out. And so that was the first wave. The second big wave, as you suggest, came in the early 1970s. And you saw an uptick in exclusionary zoning again. Communities doubling down on making sure that they weren't going to allow people of modest means coming in response to the Fair Housing Act. So you couldn't discriminate directly by race, but you could discriminate based on class. And so that's what we've seen happen throughout the country. What's interesting at the same time is that because the discrimination is class-based, when we get to policy reforms, the Coalition for Change is also class-based. And so there's something exciting in the possibilities around change on this issue.
I mean, certainly, like I could see the implications in New York City, where the, particularly like within the context of like local schools, elementary schools, but also in the context of districts. I mean, New York City does it a little bit different, obviously, than the rest of the country because of the size. But you can see that the implications in terms of education. Can you walk through like what the implications are of these and the regulation is not so much the issue as the self-sorting, although there is some of the regulation is associated with it in New York, I guess, based upon how high you can build and how big in certain areas. But will you walk us through what these regulations end up doing?
Yeah. So I've actually spent most of my career writing about education, and I was drawn to housing because housing policy is school policy. So one of the early findings in the educational research was that it matters a lot who you go to school with. So education spending matters, that's important, but it also matters whether your classmates are rich or poor. And low-income students can do amazing things if given the right opportunity. But when you concentrate poverty and all the low-income students are in one school, all the wealthy students are in another school, that feeds the achievement gap and impedes educational opportunity. And so for years, I worked on, policies that tried to promote more choice within the public school system, not vouchers, but within the public school system to get over those barriers. But I kept knocking up against the fact that, 71% of students attend neighborhood public schools. And so if you're going to deal with school segregation by economic status and race, you have to deal with housing policies. And so I had a piece in the Atlantic recently that talked, for example, about Scarsdale in the suburb of New York City. And there, they have an essential ban on multifamily housing. There are a few units around the edge of the town, but for the most part, you're not allowed to build multifamily housing. And Scarsdale, astoundingly, has 0% of its students eligible for free and reduced price lunch, which is kind of a standard indicator of economic disadvantage. So the exclusion has been virtually complete. Nearby Portchester, which is home to a lot of immigrants, a lot of Hispanic workers, some of whom mow the lawns in Scarsdale.
Right. You make the point in that piece that all the people who work, provide service for people in Scarsdale, can't afford to live in Scarsdale. They live in Portchester.
That's right. So housing policy is education policy, and that's why I think it's important. Most of my friends in the education world, they focus their attention on what the school board is doing, what the state education policy folks are doing, and that's really important. But they also, I think, should be focusing on what the housing authority is doing, what the zoning rules are, because that has a huge impact on educational opportunity.
It seems so sort of like embedded, almost like woven into the way that we think about location now in this country, because every educator we've ever had on this program has said in one way or another, you tell me the area code of where a kid lives, and I will tell you with a 90% accuracy as to and tell me what the average income is there, and I'll tell you what the scores are on the testing there, and what the outcomes are in terms of educationally, with a 90% accuracy or something to that effect. And we have this notion in this country where it's like, if you can afford to live in a good place, you live in a good place. There's good schools there, and if you can't, well, that's what it is. Rehan Salam and I think it was The Atlantic wrote a piece in response to your book. And I should just say, there's also, I can't also help but think about a conversation I had with Professor Eddie Glaude years ago on what he called the value gap, I think it was, where we're practicing, white supremacy by making these decisions in many respects. I'm going to go to the neighborhood with a good school, but it ends up like being segregated because of largely along lines of class. Go into that notion of, I guess, of what Rehan had written. You were generous with his response, I thought, but you do have to cite it's something he wrote 15 years ago to when he was reasonable in my estimation. But go ahead, I won't. But talk about what the response is from the right before we sort of get into what the response is from the nominal left, I guess.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I should say Rehan Salam, who was making the argument that exclusionary practices are kind of natural, that of course people are going to hoard opportunity. They don't want people who are going to use services but not pay the same amount in taxes. So if that landscaper lived in Scarsdale, his kids would go to the school, but the marginal tax rate's not quite as high, so maybe he wouldn't contribute as much. I mean, this was astounding to me that kind of he came out and said it, because I think a lot of people think that, but it was out there. Having said that, a lot of conservatives are very supportive of zoning reform for entirely different reasons. It's not for them primarily a matter of civil rights or exclusion. They want the government to essentially deregulate and say, well, listen, if I own this property, I should have some more say over what I can build on this particular plot of land. So there's a libertarian argument for zoning reform, and there's an economic efficiency argument, because it's really bad for productivity in this country when people can't move to areas where there are good jobs. It used to be people moved to opportunity. So you would have, Black people moving in the Great Migration up north, where there was less overt racial restrictions and also better jobs. Okies moved from Oklahoma to California. That doesn't happen anymore. People are leaving California, even though there are a lot of good jobs in California, because it's not economically productive. So I actually think this is one of the rare areas where you could get some bipartisan interest in zoning reform. It's just that there's kind of an uglier exclusionary side that Donald Trump embodies that's out there too. There's a war within conservatism and there's a war within liberalism over these policies.
I am less hopeful that war is going to turn out properly, at least on the conservative side. But let's talk about that, because it does feel like there has been a flip over the past 40 or 50 years in terms of like the relative conservative and liberal positions on this type of zoning restrictions. Talk about that dynamic.
Yeah, well, as a liberal myself, it kind of pains me to say that the worst forms of exclusionary zoning are in liberal areas in the country. And so I think it started with kind of a positive instinct to want to protect the environment, to want to make sure that we have a good democratic processes where everyone gets a say. But these tools have been weaponized to stop exclusion in places like Scarsdale. The less benign explanation of why there's worse exclusionary zoning in liberal areas is that there is some research that highly educated people who today tend to be more liberal, supporters of the Democratic Party, are less racist. They have less racial prejudice, which is a positive thing. You'd expect education to do that. But they're more biased against economically disadvantaged people and people with less education. They look down upon them. That's what the experimental research suggests. And so, if the cardinal sin of the right is racism, the cardinal sin of the left is elitism. And so we have to grapple with that fact that the worst types of zoning are in these liberal areas. I should say Fareed Zakaria is the one who made that point about the cardinal sin. I didn't mean to say that as my own.
Right. Well, okay. But isn't it also, though, that the real driver behind this is that property has become the most accessible, like people's homes have become the most accessible sort of means of growing intergenerational wealth in this country, particularly over the past like 30 or 40 years. I mean, I'm just like thinking of like, my folks in Worcester, like their homes increased in value over the prior, like 50-year span by maybe like 3%. And then over the past like 40 years, it feels like, well, even in Worcester, I mean, things are a little bit slower, but even there now, like the value of homes are increasing. And there is this fear that if somebody builds like a triple decker or like a 3-family home next door to my single family home, the value of my home is going to go down and I'm going to lose money. Is it like, how much of it is that, it seems to me?
Oh, that's a huge driver. I mean, property values has been a prime argument in favor of exclusionary zoning since back in the days when there was racial zoning. That was the argument made by the mayor of Baltimore. He said, listen, we want to protect the property values of white people because if some black people move into the neighborhood, property values will decline. So property values is central. And we have a system in America where we encourage individuals to overinvest in their housing. So they could actually make more in the stock market typically, but they overinvest in a single asset. And so they are terrified that if there's any change in the community, that could negatively affect basically their nest egg for retirement. And so it's understandable that people are anxious and worried. The best research suggests that there will not be a big negative effect on property values when there's multifamily housing nearby. Even some of the publicly subsidized housing has been found not to decrease property values to the extent that it is tastefully done and is done at an appropriate scale. So I think that's part of the point is that the fears are overblown, that this is going to have a negative effect on property values. But the other piece of it is that one person's property appreciation concerns is another person's housing affordability concern. And so young people in particular have been up in arms about the way that exclusionary zoning artificially limits the supply of housing and therefore drives up prices. We had this issue during the pandemic when used car prices went, they skyrocketed, right, in part because of supply chain issues. So we had this artificially constrained supply. That's what government policies that around zoning do on a daily basis.
Isn't it more just like also a question of what is the societal interest here? Are we there to protect the property values of individual homeowners who had the also ability to invest in said home? Or is the societal interest about expanding certain resources, whether it be through schooling or through like creating more livable areas for a variety of different people, and fostering that? That's the central question that, honestly, to your point, states with large populations in places like New York or California, they've basically essentially punted and sided with the property owners on that front.
Absolutely, you're right. There is a tension in the values here, and in a lot of states, the NIMBY forces, the not in my backyard forces, have won. I will say though that when I started researching this book back in 2017, there were not a whole lot of examples of success where NIMBYs lost. You could basically bet on NIMBYs. It was a safe bet to say property owners are the ones who are going to show up to meetings. They've got political power. They're going to stop reform. And in the last 5 or 6 years, that's flipped. And there's still setbacks in places like New York, but also successes in California and Oregon and Minneapolis and Charlotte. There are lots of places where the housing prices have just become so out of control that there is political support for taking that bigger vision and saying what is best, as you framed it, Emma, is what is best for society and also for new home buyers who want to get into the market but are priced out of it right now.
So where, like, when we talk about locales or the type of locale that we're talking about, that is essential to this. I mean, and presumably this is a policy change you'd like to see everywhere, but where describe to me, is it Scarsdale? Is that like the model, or or places like that? Give us a notion of, like, generically speaking, where we're looking at. And I do think there, just to add on to what you guys were saying, that it is healthy to look at this as people are hoarding. It's a wealth inequality thing. People are hoarding it, just like, we have problem with Social Security because so much money is being hoarded above where we tax people on the cap. We're having the same problem with housing because housing value, if you look at it not in terms of specific units, but in terms of value, is being hoarded. And like in a place like Scarsdale, the doors being shut, essentially.
Yeah, that's right. So the exclusionary, wealthy suburbs are the worst offenders. And I think that it's important to address that front and center. One of the arguments that Rehan Salam made was, that's going to be too hard a fight. So let's focus elsewhere. The easy targets for reform. As if he's telling Martin Luther King, don't go to Birmingham. That's just too big a fight. You can't win there. And obviously, King took the opposite approach and said, let's go to the places where they're the worst offenders and address that. Having said that, the cities are also often part of the problem. And so one of the astounding points is that, it's in cities where 75% of the land is typically set aside for single family homes. A place like New York City is not typical. So in Minneapolis, it was 70% of the land was set aside for single family homes. Nothing else could be, no duplexes, no triplexes. It was illegal to do that. And that's what prompted the reform. And now it is legal to build a duplex or triplex anywhere in Minneapolis. They got rid of that exclusionary policy.
What are the things around a policy? Like, I want to get to how we do this, because we're talking about hundreds, thousands of different, municipalities, counties, or whatever it is, and how we address that. But before we get that, what are the sort of the knock-on requirements as well? Because I'm thinking, just in if you have a city where there's individual houses, and you start to build multi-unit houses, well, then you need more parking, or you need to bring public transportation in ways that it doesn't move. And this is all these are all good knock-on effects, particularly when we're talking about things like climate change and whatnot. I mean, density is actually sort of the thing that we sort of want now. What are some of the other things that would be required as sort of undergirding before we get to sort of the overall sort of mechanism to make this change?
Yeah. Well, I think if you're talking about local reforms, legalizing multifamily housing is the first step. Reducing those lot size requirements that drive up the price of housing and make it less accessible to people. Beyond that, there are some smaller things that need to be done. So, for example, you were bringing up the poll tax issue. In some communities, they'll allow multifamily housing, but they'll say, well, you can have it so long as you use this expensive brick siding, which drives up the price even of the multifamily housing. So that's one of the tricks that's used. So that's another thing to go after. I think in addressing parking requirement, off-street parking requirements that are exaggerated. There was one place in Connecticut where they said if you had if you were living in a single apartment, you had to have the builder had to set aside 3 parking units off street for that one, presumably one person, and so that is it's basically a poison pill that's going to make it unfeasible for any builder to develop that. So there are all these tricks that are employed, and for that reason, I've advocated at the federal level and at the state level something I'm calling an Economic Fair Housing Act, where people could sue a local government for this panoply of exclusionary tactics that they use. It's not just one; they have many, and then the burden would be on the city to justify why they need this very, very exclusionary policy. It borrows from civil rights law, but it's the same sort of concept.
And how would they what would be the standards? I mean, I guess there would be some type of
well, Minneapolis
algorithm.
just did this with the single or with the parking spaces, right?
Minneapolis rolled back the things, but what you're talking about is a federal way in which to address the refusal. Because Scarsdale, for instance, Scarsdale, if I'm a politician in Scarsdale, the last thing in the world I'm going to do is to roll back these exclusionary zonings because it benefits every one of my constituents.
Right.
And we've shut the barn door, and that's it. And unless you have a certain amount of money, you can come in and pay for this, lot size or size house or whatever it is. You're out. So politically, but what you're suggesting is that those zoning regulations, if you did not have a locality that was going to roll them back on themselves,
Right.
could be attacked because of a federal right that exists. But what would be, do you have a notion of like what the algorithm is? Like, I mean, people proposed, let's say, for instance, gerrymandering solution to the Supreme Court, where people measured what what constituted a wasted vote in one district versus another. Like, how would you, like, where would the threshold be for zoning that was impinging upon someone's rights from an economic perspective?
Right. Well, I'll say two things. First, I'm going to completely agree that kind of political science 101 is that you want to move the decision making up the chain. So either from Scarsdale to the state level, where you have more people who are negatively affected by what Scarsdale is doing than positively affected, or up at the federal level. And then as to your question about it, kind of how this would work, the statute that I'm working on with Congressman Emanuel Cleaver from Missouri would say that it kind of borrows from disparate impact law in civil rights, which says the defendant, in this case the city of Scarsdale, would have to demonstrate that their policies are necessary to achieve the goals that they've identified. And I think it's going to be, let's say they're worried about traffic or if they're worried about overcrowding of the schools. I mean, they'll put a bunch of reasons that they want to have this policy in place. I don't think it'll stand that you have to have a minimum of an acre lot.
Thank you.
In order to make sure that the schools are not overcrowded. So that's the kind of a judge ultimately would decide these issues, but that's the case law upon which the Economic Fair Housing Act is based. There is an existing mechanism with respect to racial discrimination now. It hasn't been that effective because you have to link it to race, where usually these exclusionary laws are really based on class. They're trying to discriminate based on class.
This question just came in from an IMer and was actually one that I had. From a political standpoint, why? And I imagine your answer is going to be they're not mutually exclusive. But the Faircloth Amendment, in terms of like its limitations on building public housing, if we can't repeal that, how do we get to here?
Yeah, no, I mean, so I'm in favor of doing that. There's a lot of things that we should be doing in the housing arena, but there is proof of concept that you can get zoning reform through interesting political coalitions. So in California and in Oregon, there was bipartisan support for zoning reform to legalize the duplexes, and in California it really is, you can subdivide your lot too. So it's basically you could put 4 units on what had been a single family home unit. And it would not have passed without some support from white rural Republican legislators. And and the same thing happened in Oregon. It was the margin of victory was based on some Republican support. And who was it? It was kind of that Bobby Kennedy coalition, where people who felt excluded, either because of their race or because of their class, came together and made these reforms. And I think that it'll take some time for an Economic Fair Housing Act to pass at the federal level. But what I'm hoping is that there will be some demonstrations of state level success. For for these types of economic fair housing acts that would eventually build some support for bringing this to the federal level.
What does that success look like? Like when, like in the event that we are able to, roll back the zoning regulations in these areas, and it becomes, I guess, I guess in some instances you'd have sort of like maybe public housing, but more than likely, you'd get some developers saying like I can get 4 units of renters or something like that. What do we, when these things go through 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road, you get the data from what do you expect it to look like that is going to be able to, you're going to be able to say like, look, once we do this, this is what happens.
Yeah. Well, Minneapolis has the lowest inflation rate of any city, in part because its housing costs have not gone up the way everyone else's has, because they're building more housing. In California, we've seen an explosion in the number of they're called accessory dwelling units, ADUs. They're kind of granny flats or small apartments that you build either within a single family home or in the backyard, and so that's had a positive effect. I mean, the downstream effects of change are considerable. So you get housing prices would not accelerate as fast as they have been for years when we've had this artificially constrained supply. You have improvements in the environment because now to get housing, someone can actually live near their job. I mean, in Minneapolis, there was testimony from workers at SEIU who worked in the hospitals, said, they had to live so far outside Minneapolis and take 2 buses to get to their job. And a lot of times it's going to be cars instead of buses. And so that's, we'll have improvements for the environment. We'll have better educational opportunity for kids because there will be less exclusion of neighborhoods that have strong public schools. So we'll see a lot of the things that people want in society, but are now being constrained by these government laws that are telling people where they can live.
And how is it? I mean, do you have a sense of like the level of support in Congress? I mean, it feels like this is a multi-year effort in Congress. And are there organizations that are sort of national organizations or regional organizations that are sort of going in and targeting cities or towns? Like, is there, or is it just they have to organically develop within a specific locale in terms of the activism or a push for this?
Yeah. Well, in terms of your first question about the prospects in Congress, I testified before Congress, and it was fascinating to see the Republicans and the Democrats. They managed to snipe at each other on, about rent control and a number of issues that they disagree on, more Section 8 housing vouchers, that kind of thing. But basically, they agreed on exclusionary zoning, that it was a bad thing. And they as I say, they came at that conclusion from different points of view, but they agreed. And so there was a very modest piece of legislation that was part of a recent omnibus bill called the YIMBY Act, which provides financial incentives for local communities to reduce exclusionary zoning. So that was a small baby step in the right direction. In terms of kind of grassroots organizations that are pushing reform, I'm so impressed by the various YIMBY groups, Yes in My Backyard groups. They've been showing up at some of my book talks, and they're enthusiastic, and they have pushed for reform in Minneapolis and California and elsewhere. So these are people who recognize the harms caused by exclusionary zoning. But there have been, interesting political coalitions, not only in California and Oregon, which were bipartisan, but even in Minneapolis, you had, renters and labor unions and environmentalists and civil rights groups all coming together and saying the current system of excluding people through zoning policies and making housing unnecessarily expensive is unsustainable. And the key was that they activated those whose voices, or helped support, I should say, those whose voices had been essentially shut out in the past. So, there was one study that looked at who shows up at zoning meetings. There's one in Massachusetts, Lowell, Massachusetts, which has a predominantly Hispanic population. There was only one person over several years with a Hispanic surname who spoke at these meetings, because it was the wealthy white men, particularly, who were showing up. So Minneapolis reversed that and was able to bring voices in that had not been part of the conversation before, and that helped make a difference.
That's interesting. Yeah, I imagine there's a huge delta there in terms of like what these boards are used to getting in terms of political pressure has probably just been really narrowly tailored. It's really interesting stuff. Richard Kahlenberg, the book is Excluded: How Snob Zoning, NIMBYism, and Class Bias Build the Walls We Don't See. Which I think actually you guys did a pretty good job on the title in terms of making it sort of a little bit sexy. It is really, it's great stuff. I really appreciate it. We'll put a link to the book, and thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you both so much. I appreciate it.
All right, folks, we're going to head into the second half of the program, wherein we will talk a little bit about some of the Republican candidates running for president. As you're aware, there was a primary the other night.
Yes, primary debate.
Primary debate.
Yes.
And I joined you on it briefly, but you guys racking up big numbers.
Oh, I know. Somehow, I mean, it was. I guess we just got into the algorithm.
We're really crushing it on the commentary. People were like, "Please, like you're letting these guys talk too much. Like we want to hear what you have to say."
More of Matt and Emma. Yeah.
Is it really like that hard to predict what they're gonna say?
No, I love it though. It's so funny. It's just funny to me because it's like our views of that is like it's great how many people are watching this.
Yeah.
And they think like we're gonna be upset that they gave us one of those 920,000 views, and then sent a comment saying they don't like our commentary. It's like, no, I appreciate the engagement.
I appreciate the
You've
click.
already done your job.
Yeah, but also the important thing is that like that's what's good. That's what will bring the country together. Is
we gained some subs
hearing. We're allowing both sides to be heard simultaneously.
Yeah. Right.
Also, I will be amending a statement. I just agree with Jesse Singal of how I'll be amending it. So not to actually,
You guys have agreed?
Yeah, I just agreed.
Have you been on Twitter with him?
I have been on Twitter. Yeah.
What are you doing, Matt?
I'm fighting with him on Twitter.
You're going back and forth right now.
But yeah, basically, what I called lies last week, I want to amend to a pattern of misleading.
Wait a second. We were going to have a whole debate about this.
Okay,
and you're already conceding.
Well, now you know his position, so you have an advantage, Matt.
Exactly.
I mean, Sam.
He's taking my position.
Oh.
I may have to argue your position.
Just so we can, show both
I'm still
sides.
going to argue my position. Which is that I don't care what's going on in his head.
Well, I'm a little bit upset because he's called this show stupid. And, stupid has a very narrow definition too, right? I mean, he's going to argue the specifics. I mean, I thought you were, Matt, but now you've already conceded. You're going to argue the specifics of what the word lies means. Very, very narrow definition, although people, say that's a pack of lies, can mean broadly in its totality misinforms people, even if there is no specific false quality each sentence if they are sort of like analyzed in and of itself.
Right.
But to say overall that this show is stupid, do we have stupid elements in the show?
Certainly.
Of course. No person is 100% of anything. But to say in totality the show is stupid, I think that's defamatory.
Yeah.
But
well, look, I don't want to.
Look, let's save this debate for later.
Yes.
Talk about stepping all over it, Matt.
I mean, we've got the good stuff, the stuff people come here for. We're going to do that in the fun half.
Exactly.
Have some fun with it.
Folks, just a reminder, it is your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the free show, free of commercials, but you also get the fun half. And if you're a member, you should also know we put all the links to our advertisers where you get like a discount in the podcast or YouTube description. And so if you ever wonder like, wait, what was that link? What you can usually do is just Google Majority Report and the name of the product, and it will take you to the show where the link is. And then, eventually, probably like 5 or 6 years, I will get around to updating our advertiser thing on the website. So that's one way to go about it right there. And that'll be done, Also, I should say this as an enticement to get you to become a member. It was almost a year ago to the day. Maybe it was 12 months, 13 months. My youngest child came on this program and made some serious revelations about me that we are still it's been tied up in court for quite some time. It's against my better judgment, but he will be in studio
when?
Next week. He's going to be here for a couple of days because it was either that or figure out, like, I'm going to pay for camp for 3 days. Like, he's got school starts on a Thursday.
Yeah, you were saying that makes no sense.
Doesn't make any sense. So
it doesn't start the day after Labor Day, like
nope,
pretty
it
much
does not.
Everybody does.
So
that.
the day after Labor Day, that Tuesday and that Wednesday of next week, we do our Labor Day show pre-record. But that Tuesday and Wednesday, I'm not sure which time he'll come on. He may come on both, but it'll be good because you'll be here and he won't be able to like run the field as he did last time.
Oh, really? Yeah. I mean, Bradley created a very permissive environment, I would say, by becoming Saul's friend and allowing him to feel comfortable saying the things that he said there.
Yeah.
So Bradley won't be here to poison his mind against you.
Oh, good. Because he sees you here and he thinks he can get away with anything. I don't know why.
More tech deck ramps.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, he's out of that. Also, don't bring that up. But let's keep that there.
Oh,
don't bring
yes.
up the tech deck ramp because I may have going to go bye-bye. All right, Emma.
Yeah.
ESVN
today, we're going to have a fantasy football expert on to talk about your upcoming drafts. Dan Schneier, someone who I've become friends with through football Twitter. He'll be with us. He does a Giants podcast and also a fantasy football one. We'll be talking about the Trey Lance trade, one of the most horrific busts in NFL history, I would say, given what the San Francisco gave up to trade for him, as well as an update on the FIFA soccer, FIFA suspending that guy who sexually assaulted the female soccer player on stage. YouTube.com/ESPN show today.
Matt.
Yeah, patreon.com/Left Reckoning. We did the first section of the Communist Manifesto with R.M. Brown, which was very fun. So patreon.com/Left Reckoning. I went for about 2 hours. We thought we were going to get through 2 sections, and no. So we're just going to take it one section at a time.
Folks, we'll see you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Oh, no.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males.
Psych. Fuck them. Fuck them. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100.
Can't knock the hustle.
Come on, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We're back.
We're back, ladies and gentlemen. All right, let's read that I am. We have that I am from Affluence Wretched. Let's wait until we have some time. Oh boy, Matt got very pedantic. Matt's gone to the bathroom. He's coward. Such a coward, Matt. Running away from where I was about to hand it to him. What do you got?
Oh, nothing.
Are you all right?
I'm seeing the interaction. There's potential for direct confrontation.
You know what I love about, like, I've noticed it's like with everything. Like they'll say this about guns. Like the amosexuals will say this about guns. You don't know enough. You don't know the difference between a cartridge and a magazine, and you don't know the calibers of guns, and you don't know how many rounds a specific gun can shoot off in a second, and you don't know any of those things, and therefore you can't. Yeah, I saw that. You can't speak to this. And we're going to get this. Apparently, Jesse Singal wants to call in tomorrow. You can call in. You can call in anytime.
He's busy.
Now, I know that he must know. He's done all the research on the show. But we'll get into that later.
Okay.
But yeah, what? Look at you're distracting me. God damn it. Here is let's get to this Vivek thing.
Okay.
Because it really, I don't know. Which one do you want to go with?
5. Let's do 5.
5 first?
I think so.
Let's start with 4 and then get to 5.
Okay.
Because here's how sort of decrepit this guy is. Now, look, frankly, I don't care if he's a sleeper cell candidate. He's Soros-backed, whatnot, like...
he did take a Soros scholarship to pay for Yale, apparently.
Yeah, and he's got some powerful friends: Peter Thiel, Leonard Leo, friends with current Senator J.D. Vance, PayPal connections.
And I know that he maligned Donald Trump in his book, and yada yada yada. He's changing his tune. That's not relevant. This is just so gross to me. in fact, when we were talking to Richard Kahlenberg about his proposal to roll back zoning restrictions, Rehan Salam wrote a piece in The Atlantic saying, you know what? It's the shrillness. It's the pushiness of all the yimbys that is really polarizing. I remember years ago, I was on Hayes' show, Chris Hayes' show on MSNBC, and Christine Todd Whitman told me that, who was the former EPA under George Herbert Walker Bush, the reason why the right doesn't believe in climate change is because the liberals and the Democrats and the left has been so pushy about it that it forced us to take
what you made us do.
And here is Vivek essentially making the same argument that people who are fighting against racism are actually generating more racism.
Said that racially motivated violent extremism is on the rise. This is clearly part of that. What would a President Ramaswamy want the Justice Department to do about this racially motivated violence that we're seeing on the rise?
I think that every criminal deserves to be punished to the fullest extent of the law, especially when they're carrying out premeditated crimes like this one. This is a heinous crime. My heart goes out to the families who were affected by this. It is tragic, and this should not be happening in the United States of America. I think the fact of the matter is, Chuck, it is really just a symptom of a deeper, new form of national division that we have created. And I think one of my top jobs as the next U.S. president is really to lead with
now,
a
pause it for a
national
second,
tone.
because I want you to really pay attention to this, because this is what the right will always do, and this is what they're doing these days, whether it's in this context, whether it's in the context of CRT, whether it's in the it is always like it's an individual act, and then it's about division that has, and there's sort of like a certain passivity about it.
Except when they're Muslim. Except when they're Muslim. Then it's a part of a larger ideology. Or even when that shooter that was trans.
Right.
And then it's a part of a larger mental illness. So they pick and choose.
Right. When we're talking about race, it is always like there's no racial act. There is only individuals who are doing something, and then just the racial part is secondary to it. There's no structural aspects to this, none of that. And this is the way they fight against even the identification that racism exists. Go ahead.
Top jobs as the next U.S. president is really to lead with a national tone of character that reminds us of how we are all united across our diverse attributes. I think part of the problem is we have obsessed so much over racial and other genetic differences that we have forgotten all of the ways we're really the same as a country. And I do think we need a leader and in the White House developing that national character for this country again. We also do have a mental health epidemic across this country, Chuck, that really is reflective of a hunger for purpose and meaning. We need to fill that void, address the mental health epidemic, but this is a tragedy and deserves to be called out as heinous. That's exactly what it was.
Why do you think there are more race-based violent crimes on the right than on the left? Why is this a lot more pervasive on the right?
Well, the fact of the matter is, I think that there's a lot more violence that's also pervasive in parts of the country that supposedly are left-wing voter bases. So I don't think this is a
Pause it. Wait, this is like the way, like how she shifted this inch. The question is race-based violence.
Yeah.
Race-based violence. That the violence was based upon the race of the victim. And then he shifted, well, look at other places of the country. I don't even know what he means by other places of the country.
He means urban areas where there's crime in Chicago or in New York.
Black on black crime.
And for some reason, those crimes like associated with, I don't know, theft or other like criminal acts, that happen because people are either desperate or they're stealing or whatever, that is in any way equivalent to white supremacist violence. Like, these are the kinds of crimes that happen in every society versus the ones that are motivated by a right-wing terrorist ideology.
He wants to make sure that there is no such thing as a racially motivated crime. He wants to make sure that that cannot exist. He will not acknowledge it. Go ahead.
Of the country that supposedly are left-wing voter bases. So I don't think this is a left versus right issue. And I don't think we should try to politicize this through partisan goggles either, Chuck, especially in the wake of a tragedy like this one. The fact is there are more black men dying on the south side of Chicago.
Do you ignore the elements that allowed this manifesto to spread online, and that what we're, it does feel as if social media connects some of these hateful ideologies?
Well, the fact of the matter is I do think we have two standards that we're even applying if we're having a conversation about manifestos. We still have not yet even seen the manifesto of that transgender shooter in Nashville of a Christian school, and yet here we're focusing on the motive. So if we want to look at this through a politicized lens, let's look at what the political media and the political establishment is doing differentially in how they analyze different crimes and then create a new narrative around it. The fact is, what I said in the Nashville shooter case, I will say here. Any killing, any mass killing is heinous. We need to get to the root cause of the mental health epidemic, address that. We need leadership that sets the right tone in this country.
Can you pause it, actually? I'm sorry. So the root cause, the mental health epidemic, right? But not for the trans shooters manifesto that he just mentioned there. That, like, we have to get to the root cause of that. But this is just like another mental health thing. Let's not politicize that. And I'm sorry, white supremacy is not a mental health issue. Now, does anybody who commits this kind of act of violence probably have to have some sort of mental health problem? I would say 100% yes. That is very likely the case. But he says we have to get to the root cause here. No, the mental health part is the secondary element. The motivating factor being the white supremacy and the racism, that is the primary part that we should be focusing in on. And then he just says that's not relevant in some reason. Let's not politicize it, but keep going.
Okay. We need leadership that sets the right tone in this country. But if we are going to talk about manifestos and politicization, Chuck, I think it is incomplete not to look at the absence of releasing that Nashville shooter manifesto even as of today. That's why I personally traveled to Nashville to call for it. And that, I think, is the best evidence of real politicization in terms of what the public sees and what the public doesn't. I want to apply one standard for everybody. I don't want to look at this through partisan goggles. I want to look at this through one standard of the rule of law for everybody.
You believe racism is a mental health issue?
Well, I do believe that racism in many cases is manufactured in a way that creates more racism in this country. I cannot think of a greater way, Chuck, of driving racism in this country than to take something else away from someone based on the color of their skin. And so is there existing racism in the United States? Of course there is. But those last burning embers of racism, the last thing I want to do is throw kerosene on it. And yet that's exactly what I believe the modern culture is doing by creating race-based quota systems that deny people access to goods.
So this is all where it is. This is that racism to him is both a new phenomena created by people's racial awareness and also just the burning embers, right? Like, we burnt the house down. And people have gotten burned. There's no house there anymore, essentially. And he doesn't want to re-inflame that by rebuilding the house, essentially, on some level for people. Maybe that's a poor metaphor. The point being that he's sitting there basically blaming racial attacks on the idea that people want some sort of racial justice. Now, of course, we just had the Supreme Court roll back affirmative action. And if what he said was true, then a killing like this wouldn't have taken place, because the racist would be like, finally, now I can let go of my racism. I'm not going to, because the kerosene's been taken away by the Supreme Court.
And he doesn't want to politicize it, but he also doesn't want to address the swastikas that were painted onto the gun he used after writing a manifesto to go after black people. Like, so you don't want to talk about it is the reality.
Yeah, don't politicize it. I'm on my way to Tennessee right now.
Yeah,
exactly.
For a shooting that happened 5 months ago. And when also the same thing, the mental health element is exactly what you described, Sam. It's individualizing racism. And then when you do that, then there's no structural racism whatsoever. Then it's just about the individuals, and we shouldn't politicize it or draw larger conclusions about trends in this country. And then we don't have to address it at all because it's always an individual issue.
Of course.
Oh, and by the way, we're not going to do anything about mental health care either. Don't support socialized medicine. Don't support people having access to any to therapists through making it a guaranteed right to have health care in this country. So we'll say mental health just as a way to obfuscate and make it so individualized and atomized, but we won't do anything to address that either.
Let's go to clip number 5. Vivek basically went from Tuck Chad over to CNN or vice versa. I would imagine they went to Meet the Press, then to CNN, but I don't know. Here is Vivek, still rhymes with cake, making his claim. Well, here he is, Hannah Bash.
Another level on Friday. In addition to the comment we played, you took issue with comments from Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. She reportedly said, quote, "We don't need any more brown faces that don't want to be a brown voice." About that, you said, "These are the words of the modern grand wizards of the modern KKK." You know, I'm sure, the KKK was responsible for more than a century's worth of horrific lynchings, rapes, murders of Black people. How in any way are the views you're talking about comparable to the views and atrocities committed by the KKK?
What I said is the Grand Wizards of the KKK would be proud of what they would hear her say, because there's nothing more racist than saying that your skin color predicts something about the content of your viewpoints.
You didn't just say
ideas.
they would be proud. You said these are the words of the modern grand wizards of the modern KKK.
It is the same spirit. You're right about that, Dana. I think it is the same spirit to say that I can look at you and based on just your skin color, that I know something about the content of your character, that I know something about the content of the viewpoints you're allowed to express. For Ayanna Pressley to tell me that because of my skin color, I can't express my views, that is wrong. It is divisive. It is driving hate in this country. This is dividing our country to a breaking point.
That is a debate that is based on nonviolent discussion. That you just said you're using rhetoric, which she said she's using rhetoric. That's one thing. And another thing is to say that she represents and she is a modern version of a KKK, which, as you know, was dedicated to the subjugation and violence against Black people. How on earth is she a modern grand wizard of that kind of organization?
Let's be intellectually honest and get to the heart of what this debate ought to be about. There is a worldview that says that the remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination, that if you're Black or brown, you have to have a particular point of view. That's from Ibram Kendi. That's from Ayanna Pressley, the people I quoted in my speech yesterday.
But can you have an intellectually honest conversation when you accuse her of being a grand wizard of the KKK? Can you have that intellectually honest discussion with that kind of rhetoric?
Yes, I can, Dana, because the point I'm highlighting is that even the people who, in good spirit, we all agree that the KKK was an awful organization that is a toxic stain in our national history. So
pause it just 1 second. Also, just for those people who aren't aware, the KKK still exists.
Yeah.
I mean,
David Duke.
They still
around.
exist. You still have, and they exist in other names. In fact, some of them are painting Nazi swastikas on their guns and going out and shooting things. But what Bash should have said here is, can we agree that the Grand Wizard of the KKK was instrumental in the murders and the promulgation of like violence against Black people over the course of really, let's just say, a century?
Like lynchings. We never passed. Did we? Maybe we just recently, in the past 5 years, passed a law against lynching.
Right, like lynchings and all these things. Can we agree on that? And I think he would say yes. And then I think she says, okay, is that the same as saying she doesn't like the way you're talking?
Yeah. And she also, Pressley did not say that he should be barred from running from office, that he should be silenced in any way. She's essentially saying
she said
that
he should burn a cross on his front lawn.
Well, the equivalent of that, which is just criticizing the fact that he says racist things about non-white people and runs for office as a Republican.
Is there more? Is there
Yeah, she doesn't let up for like 3 more minutes.
Is that even the people who in good spirit, we all agree that the KKK was an awful organization that is a toxic stain in our national history. So given that we can start from that point of agreement, now that allows us to say, well, who actually sounds more like that organization today? The people who are calling for more racial discrimination on the basis of skin color. So yes, I think that is an intellectually useful starting point for a provocative discussion that we need to have in this country.
The whole point is
and I
the
think that,
KKK
I think the reality,
wasn't
Dana,
just about
is
rhetoric.
We have to speak openly.
They
in this
lynched
country.
people, they murdered people, they raped people, they burned their homes.
And that was wrong.
Simply
Whoa.
Okay, so again,
that is obviously a wrong
if
thing
you want to
for
have
them
an
to have done.
intellectual
Absolutely.
discussion, do you think that maybe comparing her to the Grand Wizard?
We'll have some fun. I'll see you out the trail.
And the notion of what she said to being a modern leader of the KKK was maybe a step too far, or you stand by what you said?
I stand by what I said to provoke an open and honest discussion in this country, because there is a gap, Dana, between what people will say in private today and what they will say in public. I think we need to close that gap. I think we need to have real, open, honest, raw conversation as Americans. That is our path to national unity. And there are many Americans today who are deeply frustrated by the new culture of anti-racism that's really racism in new clothing. And we need to have that debate in the open. Dana, I think that you're doing, with due respect, what many in the media do, picking on some fringe comment in the context of a broader context that I was offering it
fringe
in speech.
Comment.
All right, so you
the
just said
meat
that your
of the
comment
issue.
was fringe.
Let's have the courage to confront the meat of that. I'm saying you drew a fringe comment from a much longer speech. I described you picking one fringe comment from a long speech that I gave to duck debate from the real issue that I think you don't want to have, Dana, because I think you probably agree with me on this, that this is toxic rhetoric from leading politicians on dividing us on the basis of race. And I want to have the open debate.
I think this debate is fascinating and interesting and opening and important. What I did was
I do too.
Explain to our viewers that you were asked a question and you took it to a point where you called a sitting member of Congress who is black, who was having discussions about race, calling her the modern grand wizard of the KKK. And I'm just not sure how that's open and honest discussion. I want to move on, though, to another issue, a very important.
See you on the trail, and see you on the trail.
Yeah. I mean, what's more to add there?
Well,
I mean, in the sense that he got pretty frustrated. He meant to say fringe comment in my speech, right? It wasn't the main thrust of it, but you still said it. You still said it publicly because you knew and you thought that you could have this do what Tucker Carlson or other right wingers do, where you make a comment to particularly rile up the white supremacists that might be following you and then have plausible deniability later. And she called him out on it.
I mean, what's interesting to me about this is Vivek has been cultivating before, I think the past few months, early on was cultivating a particularly black following on YouTube, I noticed. And I'd be curious, was particularly early Malcolm X, was he a grand wizard too? Was Stokely Carmichael, were they a grand wizard? Let's get into this history there. Because I wouldn't the Nation of Islam. I don't subscribe to all their racial views, to say the least. But to call them the KKK is just such a. I mean, it's a denial of white supremacy.
It's a denial, of the level of violence that we're talking about, but also the whole structural dynamic in the society.
But then to call a congressperson
a black woman too, Ayanna Pressley, that's not that's on purpose.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry, Dana, but you are basically highlighting the dog whistle, and it's not but you're not supposed to be hearing the dog whistle.
I was trying to be like MLK when I called that person a grand wizard of the KKK.
Yeah.
I was just saying we should all not see race.
Daredevil on the IMs. Happy birthday, Bob Carmody. OG chat mod, an impressionist extraordinaire. Here is your shofar. DeSantis? Or
Oh yeah, we should do that,
I
right?
mean, it's like kind of a closing the clearance sale on DeSantis stuff. I feel like.
Yeah, right. Soon he might be like dropping out, and we won't have
All
the
DeSantis
opportunity to
clips
talk
must
about
go.
him. Yes.
do you think he's going to drop out?
No.
Has it really gotten that bad?
It's
I don't
so
think so.
brutal. I mean,
He'll
his
stick
social
through
media
it.
is so dead. He tweets out like, "Hey, let us know if you're with us," and it gets like 18 retweets over 24 hours.
Well, that's because everybody's on.
I guess
on
Truth, or maybe I'm just trying to be open here. Maybe DeSantis's followers have all gone to Blue Sky.
I wouldn't bet on that, but I also wouldn't bet on him dropping out.
Mastodon?
I do think he's gonna stick it. None of those are. Yeah, I know. I think he's gonna stick it out because he literally is hoping Trump dies. Gets replaced at the convention.
Honestly, like that is not. That is not. I mean, that's not a horrible bet. The problem is the longer he stays in, the more unlikable he is. If he's smart, he suspends but not drops out the campaign, and then just pops back up sometime around. I don't know.
if Trump goes down, maybe like say like I'm going to suspend. I support Trump. That would give him a lot of goodwill. He could duck his head down for a little bit and not take so much flack, and then actually get in if it's time to play.
He's
ball.
going to run out of money is the issue
Yeah.
at one point.
And I also do think, though, it'll be even once we see that second debate in a few weeks, I think it'll be a little bit more clear to what the behind the scenes stuff is. Because my theory was that he wasn't getting really attacked by the other Republicans on the stage in the first night's debate. And I think that there's broad like consensus among people in the party that we need to have an alternative to Trump. We're going to get hosed.
That's the thing.
And
is
all
that-
the donors are saying, don't go after Ron, don't do it. And he was basically largely untouched. I'd be curious to see if that is consistent next time.
That's the amazing thing about the debate. I mean, I was really blown away by how diminished they all seemed. And he tried to seem like he was presidential.
Yeah.
And impassioned, but it just came off as like
Whiny.
weird yelling.
Yeah.
And there is no like, who is the backup if Trump goes down? I mean, there's no one on that stage who isn't like, maybe DeSantis is the only one who would not, and maybe Ramaswamy, but there's no way that Ramaswamy is going to get nominated in the Republican Party. It's just not going to happen. I'm sorry, folks. And anybody but DeSantis, like I feel like 1/3 of the voters will just say, I'm not going to the polls. They screwed over Donald Trump.
Oh my God.
And then,
and they might do that with DeSantis regardless.
DeSantis, I think it's going to be 15 to 20%.
If they're really setting the table for a convention dethroning of Trump to install DeSantis, it will be like, I mean, I don't even know how to make a prediction about what the reaction will be.
This is, I mean, I think even if Trump is in I mean, who knows? So this is all just mindless speculation. And literally 2 hours ago, I was like, I'm not even going to bother talking about this because who knows? But if they put somebody else on the ballot, the issue isn't whether they can beat Biden or not. Maybe they can. But the anger that might be associated with even, let's just say, 5 or 10% of Trump voters, that's going to screw them in the Senate. And that's going to screw them in the House. Like it may be worthwhile for them to even keep Trump on the ballot so that, like, because then the strategy becomes like, we just need to save the House or the Senate. And we do that by keeping Trump on the ballot and you know, try and convince them to go out and vote for the Republican senatorial candidate without alienating that base.
Yes.
Now, of course, there's a whole nother question because 70% of, you know, of people, like something like 65% of Democrats even say, you know, Joe Biden, we don't think we think he's too old to serve as president. You know, the bottom line is you get two choices, you know, that have a chance of winning the presidency, regardless of what you think about any, you know, third or fourth or fifth party candidate. and people might just pull the lever for him as opposed to a indicted or an imprisoned candidate. Who knows?
Now
It's
that we
crazy.
tease this out, it's their best option to keep Trump on the ballot for that reason. Because if they do try to, remove him and install someone like Trump will run third party. Trump will run third party because this is existential for him, and he's delusional enough to think that he can win.
And they are getting nervous though, because it seems like from a lot of different accounts, Rupert Murdoch is like really, really putting pressure on Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin to come into the race late, which makes me think that A, he still is really, really ardent about Trump not winning, and B, he thinks none of these other people have any shot.
Yeah.
And then also on the other end, it seems like Biden world people are getting kind of annoyed that Gavin Newsom is still trying to like drum up the him debate stuff, while also still having Kamala Harris be trotted out in many more places. Like, I feel like on the periphery, there's a lot of sort of like breathing down other people's neck in the party of like, what will happen if we actually don't have the options we think we're going to have because of, any sort of act of God on either end of the spectrum.
Right.
Antonin Scalia's ghost. New Hampshire's already looking into taking Trump off all ballots. Again, they can do that, but either Trump runs third party or fourth party, fifth party, whatever, how many parties there are, or he's prevented from running in some way, but the impact is going to be just as bad. In fact, if I'm the Republicans, I may want him to run third party just to get them to come out, although their anger towards the Republican Party could be such that, like, I'm never voting for a Republican again. I mean, they're in a jam. But with that said, there's one caveat. So if somebody clips this, we're making a lot of assumptions about Biden and about Trump here that I think are just impossible to make. All right. So let's cover
Putting
the
that
DeSantis
aside.
thing.
Yeah, right.
Here's Ron DeSantis down in Florida having to walk this tightrope of both not alienating his supporters who want him to be racist, but also not alienating the people in Florida and maybe nationally who feel discomfort at the idea of a guy writing, I want to kill black people, essentially, broadly, if we're to believe the sheriff from Jacksonville, and painting Nazi swastikas on his gun. Here is DeSantis.
I'd like to say a few additional words about what happened in Jacksonville yesterday. Florida, the state, and its people condemn the horrific racially motivated murders perpetrated by a deranged scumbag in Jacksonville at the Dollar General store. Perpetrating violence of this kind is unacceptable, and targeting people due to their race has no place in the state of Florida. Casey and I extend condolences to the victims and their families on behalf of the entire state of Florida. I've spoken with Jacksonville Mayor Deegan, Sheriff Waters, and President Faison from Edward Waters College. We will work with Dr. Faison to ensure the college has adequate security, just like we've done when our Jewish day schools have been receiving threats. We're not going to...
It's weird that all this stuff is happening around Florida.
DeSantis is only in favor of targeting people for prosecution for voter fraud based on their race, not necessarily in terms of murdering them. So that's the line he's trying to draw. How noble.
Pop up, this is DeSantis showing up at a vigil later that evening, right? I think it was, or that afternoon.
Not sure I'd want to see him.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is here. We're going to ask the governor if he will come on and bring remarks.
Yeah, exactly. Wow.
Well, thank you for doing this. I want to just say to the councilwoman, I got you. Don't worry about it. We've already been looking to identify funds to be able to help make sure there's adequate security for Edward Waters College. We are not going to allow these institutions to be targeted by people.
Now, you hear people saying your politics caused this. They're booing him, and he's trying to like have I'm going to let everybody see how I'm, providing for this councilwoman. Now, I think she goes on to say, like, this is not about politics. We don't want to, politicize this. It's not about parties and this and that. And that's a smart thing for her to say because
they need help.
I don't think there's a more vindictive governor in the country who, you remember everything they did with Disney just because Disney came out and dared to say, like, we don't think you should be so discriminatory towards gay people or say that, we can't talk about being gay in
or his
education.
targeting of non-white, somewhat. I think at least the woman was the DAs and prosecutors that were elected, and trying to remove them
without a doubt.
He's incredibly retaliatory.
And so she gets up there and says, "This is not about politics and this and that," but because there's going to be funding or whatever there is that they're going to want from the state. She's hoping to get it and doesn't want to embarrass him there, but. These people, they live in Florida. They understand what he's been doing. They understand what that party is about. Let's go to the IMs. Teacher Dan, I want to see that DeSantis effing sweat. Teaching about DeSantis' speech in Jacksonville has already been banned in Florida schools.
Because it said racially motivated. Yeah.
Right.
That'd be funny if it wasn't like plausible.
Hey, would you blow me? Welcome back.
Hey.
Kowalski, something I forgot with the Emma Majority Report Analytics, weekly viewership was up almost 500%.
Whoa.
Interesting. Cedar Simp. Who is this man talking right now? Okay, Ryan and Callie. Yesterday was my birthday. Can I get a whoopsie or a Vivek rhymes with the cake? See you up on the trail in honor of surviving 6 decades of mostly conservative government.
So Fox and friends, join us on the trail. We'll have some fun. I'll see you out the trail.
Out the trail. It's not even on the trail. What is out the trail?
It's the way black people talk.
It was just him like stumbling.
It was him trying to be like a rapper.
See out.
He's trying to have like,
I'm trying to throw a little
street
bit of
talk.
twang on
See
it.
out. He was trying to say like,
see you out the trail.
We'll have some fun on the trail, and we'll see you out in the mail.
I took the on out, and like that gives me street cred, right? See you out on the trail.
He could have said
out here.
See you out
out there
on Hill and Dale.
Oh God,
could have done that.
He could have done that, but he did not do that.
No.
You should ghostwrite his his freestyles next time.
I love the supreme confidence that he could do that because he was definitely pushing to do it.
Mm-hmm.
He interrupts Steve Ducey when Ducey's about to end the segment.
Yeah, so, wait, let me
do it, Steve.
Yeah, it's funny because it makes me appreciate actual freestyle a little bit more because often I think like, oh, like this might be some kind of freestyle, but you rehearse these sorts of patterns and lines. You think about this stuff all the time, and it's very clear that Vivek doesn't.
Yeah. He didn't learn about that part.
It's Vivek rhymes with cake.
That's what I said.
WTF, Cody? I'll always remember your reign, Emma.
Thank you.
Would we say that everyone who owned slaves and agreed with slavery back in the day were all disturbed? They all had to be insane by this logic to commit these atrocities. My point being that people can kill and do horrible things just because it's normalized in their society. People would watch executions with glee. Everyone would gather at the town square to see someone hung or have the head cut off. People used to pack into the Roman Colosseums and watch people kill each other and animals. The fact is, all people are capable of violence. The society and ideology that person can greatly increase the chances of a person doing something we now view as horrific. Yes, that's absolutely true. And I do think, though, I mean, the society creates the baseline for what is within the realm of like acceptable behavior. But it's not just a binary. It is gradations. And so you may have like a narrow realm of what is acceptable behavior. And as you get further out from those lines, it's not binary. it's gradations, and you need to be a certain way depending on where, how far out from those sort of like what the sort of the green zone is in terms of what is acceptable. And as you expand that sort of green zone, maybe even 10 years ago, it was like you couldn't, or whatever it was, Jimmy the Greek gets thrown off of ABC television. I can't remember when it was, Monday Night Football. I don't know if it was like 30 years ago or what, for saying that, black athletes were bred to be physically superior.
Mm-hmm.
Something to that effect. Today, I think you've got people saying that all across the board. I don't know if they say it on Fox, but they're pretty darn close.
Certainly. Yeah, that was 1988. Yeah. What was the other, the basketball announcer too? That guy, Don Imus as well.
Nappy-headed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Freedom Poutine, Big Cedar colluded to get Sam back in. Billy, the patriarchy returns. Ashmonson. Sam, Emma let me say the F word while you were gone. Why are you so effing oppressive? Juniper J. This guy had swastika on his gun. We need to stop calling him a young man and call him a Nazi. F. Jesse Singal. Just writing to support the IMer who caused you to issue a correction. Jesse Singal is unequivocally a transphobic asset. Now, listen, that is an opinion. We allow opinions on here. I'm not even sure if there is a way you can assess whether someone's an asshat or not.
Right.
Anyone who can't see that is missing something, maybe their own unexamined transphobia, maybe perspective. And if we're the ones missing something, they could give us an argument to explain how a man whose BS is regularly quoted approvingly in transphobic legislation, whose reporting has significantly exaggerated the importance of detransitioners, and who has generally acted like someone who at the very least does not care if it helps or hurts trans folks, is somehow not a transphobe. Thank you for all you do.
Transphobic lawsuits, just to, in case we don't open that I am up to pedantry, it's transphobic lawsuits.
What's that?
What they were cited in, or at least what I know. It might be cited in transphobic legislation, but I know specifically the lawsuit brought by multiple.
Oh, right.
Trans attorney general.
Right, exactly. Let's do that now. Should we get to this?
Sure.
Or should we just do the Tim
save it
Pool
for
thing
tomorrow.
first? Oh, I say we do it now, and then
him
tomorrow,
call
if he
in.
wants to call in, he could absolutely. I mean, look, I'm not going to be accused of not fixing this as soon as we have the opportunity to do it.
Absolutely. I mean, we're on top of it.
Do you have the that original? Oh, you sent it to me, right?
Yeah, I can read this. I am thank you, Affluence and Wretchedness. You wrote in and said,
Okay, well, wait. Let me contextualize it. Okay,
yes, sure.
So apparently Friday on the show, when I was not here, as folks know, I was on vacation. At the end of the show, Emma received an IM.
Yes.
And she read the IM and reacted to it. The IM said, criticized the writer Jesse Singal for amplifying or publicizing part of the affidavit from Jamie Reed. She was the, I guess she worked at the front of a.
She was a case manager at a clinic that did trans
in
affirming
St.
care.
Louis.
Yes.
And she came out with all sorts of accusations about the St. Louis clinic, essentially really shoving people through a pipeline to get trans care. And subsequent reporting showed that her story was not corroborated by the vast majority, overwhelming majority. It almost understates it by saying that of parents and children who went through or who dealt with that clinic, I should say. And this IMer said that Jesse promoted her affidavit, which she gave a sworn affidavit, and promoted the part that talked about OCD care, that one of the patients had OCD, and they were given hormone therapy for the OCD, presumably, whatnot. And that IMer saw that there was a controversy and has written back. Here, why don't you read that?
Affluence and Wretchedness says, I am so sorry that my IM last week made Jesse Singal angry with you all. He's a transphobe and a huge loser, but I accept and confess that I made an attribution error. The article I was referring to was written by whistleblower Jamie Reed for Barry Weiss's terrible Substack, not Jesse Singal, who has his who has his own terrible Substack. Nothing Reed says should be taken at face value, as the assigned media post Emma read on Friday explained. Reed's assertions about the patient with OCD demonstrate a real failure to understand both OCD treatment and gender-affirming care. Anyway, big congrats to Jesse on all of those shout-outs he's been getting in anti-trans legislation, and sorry to the crew for drawing his ire.
Now, Emma and read that IM.
Yes.
And I went back to research this, and it is the case that Jesse did never mention the OCD thing in his piece where he promoted other parts of the affidavit on his Substack. So he didn't do the OCD part. He did other parts. And as far as I can tell, he only wrote 2 pieces on Jamie Reed. Now, I may be wrong. Because some stuff is not necessarily always indexed. But he basically just said you should be skeptical of all the other people who basically did not corroborate Jamie Reed's assessment. Now, I don't know where, that was basically it. So I just want to make that 100% clear.
Yes.
While he wrote 2 pieces, largely in defense of Jamie Reed's account, he never mentioned the words OCD or that part of her affidavit.
That was just other spurious bullshit that she included in the affidavit.
That is, I think, accurate, because I want to be accurate, but I just want to make it clear that the IMer, I would agree with the IMer that they had the wrong attribution. Now, we should also add, because Jesse wanted me to look into this too, you expressed the opinion
that he was a transphobe.
Now, I don't think...
And I also said garbage human being.
And, okay. The garbage human being, what's with the transphobe? There is no ultimate source who gets to deem whether someone's a transphobe or not. I don't think it's out of the bounds of what reasonable people think that he's a transphobe.
Yes.
No, for instance, GLAD, I think.
Yes, GLAD has a
suggests that.
tab on Jesse.
They have a whole webpage. You wanna
where
pull that
they,
up, Bradley?
yeah, we could, we don't need to. This is not our statement, but this is GLAD's statement about Jesse.
Okay, all right. Now I want to be fair here.
Yes.
This is GLAD, on their page where they talk about people who they say may be transphobic. Okay, fine. That's one side of the argument. But do you have the citation? Can we show the citation from the Republican AGs? Now, this is a citation from a Republican lawsuit in 2019 that this was a brief where you had, I think it was like 6, 7 Republican AGs, Texas, Nebraska, Kentucky, Kansas, Louisiana, Arizona, and Mississippi, where they were suing the United States Department of Health over having to provide trans health care as, under federal guidelines. And they cited Jesse's piece from The Atlantic from way back in 2018. Well, it was 2019 when they did this. And that's on page 21. We can go down to it. Can you scroll down to that?
This is a screenshot here, but yeah.
Okay, I'll scroll down to it because I happen to have it. Because I did my research because I needed to look into this. And it was page 21. And they say, let's see here. Okay. The bathroom example highlights the fundamental point that putative interveners miss. The basis of sex discrimination law as it currently exists is biological sex. By contrast, there is no broad consensus, much less federal law, on the proper approach to treating individuals with gender dysphoria, the clinical term for the feeling of disconnect between one's gender and sex at birth. Now, I don't, to say that there's no broad consensus, there is a broad consensus within the medical profession, how you treat gender dysphoria. Now, you could disagree with what that consensus is, but there is a broad consensus amongst medical professionals as to how one treats gender dysphoria. I would not go to lay people and say, how would you treat gender dysphoria?
Mm-hmm.
I would not go to lay people and say, like, how would you treat some other mental or physical issue that people are having? I wouldn't even cite that. Like, because you don't ask the general population about a medical question. But there is broad consensus. But it's weird that they say that. The clinical term, and they say it's a clinical term, for the feeling of disconnect between one's gender identity and sex at birth. E.g., what does that mean, Matt? You're a you were a master. Yeah.
For example.
For example, Jesse Singal, comma, when children say they're trans, The Atlantic, July, August 2018, and then in parens describing the, quote, growing number of people, end quote, who regret transitioning to a different sex and later detransition. Now, I have no doubt there was a raw figure of people that was a growing number of people.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a growing number of people who are transitioning. It is not a social contagion, as I've seen.
In the same way, left-handedness was not a social contagion once more people began to identify as being left-handed when the stigma had been lifted from that.
I don't think that actually, being gay was a, or being being an out gay person was a sort of like a, people decided to do that just because it was hip and cool. It's because society, the implications and problems associated with that. So just as in, like, they would report, like, subway crime was up after the pandemic.
Right.
Well, ridership was up.
Yeah.
And the relationship between crime and ridership did not change. To say without any context, there's a growing number of people who regret transitioning is to ignore the fact that, like, if I give 100 people cosmetic surgery, let's say, or, I've known women who had breast reduction or rhinoplasty, or let's say, whatever it is, if I give 100, there's going to be a number of people who regret having it. If I provide it for 200 people, largely you could expect that the number's going to grow. It may double, may not double, but it's going to grow. Without context, you get a misleading idea that it is being provided to a higher percentage of people for whom it is not appropriate.
I'm going to give this context just really quickly. This is from the American Journal, or it's from Pediatrics, I should say. They did a study of 5 years after initial social transition for children. 7.3% of youth had retransitioned at least once. At the end of this period, most youth identified as binary transgender youth. That's 94%, including 1.3% who retransitioned to another identity before returning to their binary transgender identity. A total of 2.5% of youth identified as cisgender and 3.5% as non-binary. Later cisgender identities were more common among youth whose initial social transition occurred before age 6 years. Their retransitions often occurred before age 10 years. The 94% figure is the figure that after 5 years, those trans children continue to identify as the gender that they had socially transitioned into. Then the 2.5% is the figure where they go back to their cisgender identification, and that is heavily weighted under the age of 6 years old. 3.5% is non-binary. That is the figure that takes into account the dynamic that you're describing.
And to be clear, a social transition means they just probably like wear clothes that are less gender associated with boys' clothes.
Yep.
Or maybe they, whatever. I mean, it is, I've known multiple kids who have done that, and all it basically taught them was to be more accepting of people and go through life.
Yes, that is before the like more intervention.
Putting that
yes.
aside.
Yes.
Okay. The growing number of people who regret transitioning to a different sex and later detransition. Now, it's possible the Republicans cited that and that little thing, and it gave a misleading perception of what the article is. And this is an important dynamic because you can provide, and it's a quote, so I have no doubt, growing number of people, those words are definitely there. You can provide people something that is not a lie, but it can be misleading enough in the way that it's framed or presented that it has the real world implications of a lie, which brings us to and look, I don't know, Jesse, what do you call him, a garbage person?
Yeah, and a transphobe, I think.
My experience, limited experience with him has been unpleasant.
A garbage human being. I just want to be as accurate as possible. I called Jesse a garbage human being and then also a transphobe.
Okay. Well, the transphobe, we've already said, the point is that you could say he's transphobe. Glad says he is.
Yeah.
But these Republican AGs from these red states who are trying to stop trans care, they don't think he's a transphobe.
That's the other side of the coin.
And, to be extra judicious, Glad doesn't say he's a transphobe. They just devote an entire page on their website to the different misleading parts.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Matt.
There you go. All right. So we don't know. It's in dispute. The Republican AGs who want to stop trans care, they don't say he's a transphobe.
Here's what Glad says on that piece. Singal's story was criticized for front-loading the case's, quote, this is from Slate, as the piece goes on, notably without a single happy, well-adjusted trans teen among its host of central characters for the first 9,000-plus words, it becomes apparent that certain voices and fears are privileged over others. The Atlantic published follow-up letters from parents. I write to you as a mother of a transgender son. This piece penned by you is highly problematic. It muddies the water for parents navigating this path of raising a trans child and is damaging to our trans youth. And I'll just say, I think both the GOP AGs and Glad agree with that assessment of that parent.
Well, okay, so this gets to the other issue, is that you said, and let's get the quote here.
Yeah.
You said in that same segment, and I'm doing this because I'm doing it out of respect for Jesse, who emailed me and wanted
Was
me.
very upset.
He was very upset, and also I saw him on Twitter, but we'll talk about that. I didn't see that until later, actually, after I saw his email. And here it is. You said lies were cited by Republican attorney generals for the work he is doing.
Correct.
Now, let's just be honest about this. Grammatically, it's a sloppy sentence.
Yeah.
I mean, don't you have a master's?
I have a English degree, communication studies degree as well, and a master's in media studies.
Let's just we got to air this out. Yeah. You said lies were cited by a Republican attorney general for the work he's doing. Now, to be fair, you were off camera, and maybe you stepped on a little bit. Am I Am I accurately saying what you said?
Yes, I
Okay.
listened to it again. I kind of say lies underneath, but yeah, lies is what I said.
Yeah, but what does that mean? Well, lies were cited by Republican attorney generals for the work he is doing. They didn't do that for the work he's doing. They did it for the work they're doing.
Right. I mean, look.
It made it sound like they were commending him, although it is an honor, I guess, to be in a brief and be considered an authority.
If it was towards policy that I was, in support of, I would think it was an honor if I was cited.
But in some ways, he's doing the work. They're doing the work. They're
using it.
Using it for his work. Like it is in service. His work is in service of this really bad agenda, which I don't know if he agrees with or not. Maybe let's just stipulate it. He doesn't agree with that lawsuit. But somehow they're manipulating the work he's doing.
Yeah.
And gosh, I will say for me, it's one thing to I got this opportunity to write this big article in The Atlantic. I'm not doing it for my career or anything. I genuinely believe that this is a real problem. And, but I want to make sure that it's not being used in an incorrect way. It's a danger. In fact, I've heard them say on their podcast, the two of them, he and his co-host, one of the dangers, this stuff can be used by conservatives. If I did that and then I saw that it was being used, I might be more judicious in the way that I approach this subject in the future. Because if my real agenda was just to deal with the nuance, back in 2018, I'm just looking at the nuance.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I see this snowball. Would you keep throwing snow on it? I wouldn't.
Well, I would at least send an email to the manager of whoever put together this brief or what's the citation here? These attorneys general.
Yeah.
I don't know if Jesse has spoken privately to the creators of this lawsuit and has said that I object to the usage of my work.
So
here.
he
reached out to us because he had problems with our
He
work.
issued a tweet at the time saying these people have used my work in 180 degrees differently than I intended it. And I'll just say I find that completely bullshit. Both GLAD and those AGs found your article useful toward a certain end.
Okay.
And
all right,
also
but
that's my impression too.
You're a cynic, but we can see from his work since then that he was far more sensitive to being used in that way, right?
Right. Yeah.
Or
sure.
no.
Yeah, I don't know. And, I don't know. I got in a back and forth with him now, and, GLAD cites this. Amplified, unproven social theory of contagion. Some anecdotal evidence suggests that social forces can play a role in young person's gender questioning. I've seen this more frequently. He cites psychologist Laura Edwards-Leeper wrote in an email. And GLAD says a widely cited study on this alleged influence was reissued with the correction reading rapid onset gender dysphoria is not a formal mental health diagnosis at this time. This report. Now, he comes and says there might be some issue on whether they recognize that. But I also see this article in the Scientific American from a few days ago. The American Psychological Association and 61 other healthcare providers organizations signed a letter in 2021 denouncing the validity of rapid onset gender dysphoria as a clinical diagnosis, and a steadily growing body of scientific evidence demonstrates that it does not reflect transgender adolescents' experiences and that social contagion is not causing more young people to seek gender-affirming care. So, look, maybe there's... I'm
sure he's going to write up that study.
I think he'll write it up when there's movement toward, I think, what I am just guessing based on his output to be his preferred feelings on this topic.
Now, you and I were going to have a debate over the other part of the question, which was
Conscious
the lies
lying.
part.
Yeah, but I'll say, look, I'll be very magnanimous. I'm interested in one contention, then they can kind of get confused. So one is that is Jesse Singal consciously lying when he airs this stuff? I'm less interested in that. I'm interested in is it anti-trans, and I got my answer from Republican attorneys general and GLAD.
Well, this is akin to, conservatives saying well, Donald Trump can't be guilty of trying to overthrow the election because he thought it was, he really won it.
No, so I do have to amend based on, making sure I want the contention that I want foregrounded, that it's just a misleading pattern of reporting and not conscious lies. So
and not just the reporting, it's also the writing too.
Yeah.
I mean, because when you front load all this stuff,
the edge
I mean,
cases.
look,
right.
If I put out a newspaper and all I put on the front page every single day was a mugging here and a mugging there and this and that. And every page was full of muggings. And then on page 30, I put like statistics for the crime. Muggings down 5% this year, year over year. Is there any falsehoods in that paper? If I have 29 pages full of every mugging that's taken place in New York City, every piece of crime, whatever it is, and then on page 30 of that newspaper, I put, incidentally, crime is down 5% year over year. Am I lying? Not according to Jesse, and I think probably not according to like the absolute strictest definition in the dictionary. But am I misleading people by either omission or by
lack of emphasis?
Emphasis.
I mean, I do have some advice for Jesse in case he wants to continue writing on the subject, was apparently is the only one he ever writes about. That if you want to not be understood as anti-trans by both Republicans pursuing an anti-trans agenda and pro-LGBT groups, the inverted pyramid is structured, is the most important to least, this is the inverted pyramid structure of journalism. The inverted pyramid is structured from most important to least important. The pressing content leading and then the less essential material following, decreasing in importance over the course of an article or written piece. Might stop you from getting cited from both hate mongers and anti-hate groups.
It might, yeah. Any real honest, like intellectual analysis of trans issues in this country would weight I believe, the statistical propensity for, children, say, who decide to transition continuing with that gender. They would weight their reporting in a way that was proportionate with those numbers, right? Like that's how I would, if I was trying to intellectually explore this topic, that's how I would approach something, not just focusing on the 3-ish% that I mentioned earlier in that, maybe not just, but often focusing on that smaller figure and front loading my reporting on that. You might, I would say it's natural that some people might draw some conclusions based on that peculiar emphasis of more edge cases versus the overwhelming statistical data.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
But I just want to say, we did this because Jesse was very, very upset that you had not Googled when you read that IM. Now, he
fits a pattern, I would say. We should just say about journalistic integrity.
He accused me of saying those things. I was on vacation. Then he accused Matt Binder because he had sources apparently that told him it was Matt Binder.
Oh, Bradley.
Now,
shout out to those sources who listen to this show every day.
And now, to his credit, he did delete those. He has on his podcast, and he felt that he was defamed, straightforwardly defamed, because his article was referred to as lies. He has, on his program, because I had to go and do research on this and Google him to look up some of his stuff, he has said that this show is stupid.
Wow.
Now, is this show 49% stupid? Maybe. But is it 51% stupid? I think we just had somebody on who was very well educated and we interviewed him for.
Also,
now,
do we know that
possible.
it's stupid? You have to prove that we know it's stupid.
I want proof that the show is stupid, if that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
And because that's defamatory.
Oh, yeah.
And the idea that we do this type of stuff, according to him and his co-host, that we will talk about trans rights because it's cash and it also it is virtue signaling. There's nothing I can do about the supposed virtue signaling that's associated with wanting
do more of that
rights for people. But we're going to clip this entire clip and we're going to demonetize it. Make sure that you tell everybody we will not make a dime off of this.
No.
In fact, it's costing money because we can't do,
other clips.
40 clips we had of Dave Rubin
that
we were going to do today. We can't do those. And also, I should also say, in terms of defamatory, his co-host, because, he came and reported to the manager in this situation, supposedly, his co-host on a Twitter thread claimed that I stole someone's photograph for a thumbnail, which it was not the case. And I know Jesse saw that because he jumped into that thread to make some other criticism.
Wow.
And so I just want to say, like, this is out there. I'm not. It's defamatory.
8
When you
lawyers
say,
are on the case now.
here's the thing. When you say this is a pack of lies, that's an opinion. When you say someone's a transphobe, that's an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
When you say someone's a garbage person, that's an opinion.
Yeah.
But when you say someone took a specific action that can be assessed, whether that action is taken, that's where you start to run into like genuinely actionable defamatory practices.
Absolutely.
People think I'm a thief. This is going to hurt my business. In addition to, like, what do I tell my kids? But I'm just saying. All right. Are we done with that?
No, yeah.
I think we've given a full correction
Yes.
and retraction
Amendment.
where it's necessary.
Absolutely. Yeah, everyone has all the facts now, so they can make their determinations about whether or not they think that Jesse is a garbage person, or if they think Jesse is a transphobe or not. They can make that choice now, just with all the information presented to them.
And let's put in a link to the Republican AG stuff and all the stuff we referenced. Make sure we put that into this thing so
practices.
that everybody can have the opportunity to follow through this stuff.
Huge weight off, man.
That almost saves him from having to write another article.
There you go.
Just talk about this for another 2 weeks.
Exactly.
If someone else has been mean to him.
You better not monetize it. Better not monetize it. What should we do here? What is, let's have one that's
Tim Pool.
fun. Tim Pool.
This is great.
This is like Tim Pool. I don't know. Maybe, I always was of the mind that, one day, like when you've given so many like bad sort of analysis of politics and whether you've proven wrong time and time again, that you'll stop.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be too embarrassed.
He stopped predicting civil war because he did that dozens.
Oh, no, he is not.
Of times?
No, it's been like a week, I think, since his last prediction of civil war.
But now he says it's a communist revolution, so it's moved on.
So it's evolving.
Graduated, yeah.
But once you've run out of that, what do you do? Well, maybe you get into some men's rights and pickup artist stuff. You bring back some of the greatest hits. Here he is with his theory about how we should be shaming women that he doesn't like, I guess.
And we need leaders to do it.
Oh, do we know who's on here? It's
Fresh and Fit and Jason Howerton, who are apparently
YouTubers Fresh and Fit and Jason Howerton.
Okay, cool.
All different levels on our podcast. And what I've come to realize is the abundance of options that modern day women have is absolutely influenced how they view the opposite gender. Most women, unfortunately, do not respect most men. Most women think most men are below them. They will not date most men. They think most men are invisible, and they think most men are inferior to them when it comes to, I want a top tier guy. Because when I ask girls, what do you want in a man? And we actually ask them, they always describe a guy in the top 2 to 3%.
I would say that's, maybe it's too bold to say statistically proven, but I would say we have seen tons of data showing exactly what you said is most likely to be the case. I think it was Tinder or OkCupid's data showing that the average man has a natural bell curve for female attraction and value, and the average female has a super warped curve that they
Pause it
only
for one
look
second. All right, let's just, there's a couple of things here. A lot of people are on Tinder, but this only gives you the average user of Tinder.
Yeah.
This is so dumb. I just want people to understand, like, every single assumption that they are making and taking as the grounding, even if he says it may be too strong a word to say that this is a data. No, it's worse than that. Everything you think is like data, like a Tinder.
Here's some more data. Tinder is 75% male. So maybe a supply and demand reason for why the women are a little bit more selective on a dating app where they have that much more choice.
It's just like it's the level of like so desperate to get to where they want to go. They're just not even going to do even the slightest bit of assessment of what their priors are. But go ahead.
The average man has a natural bell curve for female attraction and value, and the average female has a super warped curve.
Yes.
That they only look at men they would rate 8. Men that are on average rated 8 to 10 are deemed average, and for men the bell curve is normal. Like the average woman is average.
Can I ask about the methodology behind this rating system? Is this about just attractiveness? Is
Some
this also
survey they
about,
did on Tinder.
It's also about jobs? Is it about earnings? Is it about height? Is it about race?
Look, like these
What are we talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Like that. This is just like a male, female, and like appearance thing. Like, I mean, there are elements of social or dating that I think probably aren't very helpful. I don't think that it is exclusively disadvantageous to men. So I think that's where I depart from Tim here.
Bingo Dango says the OkCupid statistic stuff has been debunked for years at this point. Well, of course, it is a self-selecting group of people that want to be on a dating app and assess who they're going to go out on a date with based upon pictures of people and like other sort of signifiers. I mean, it's, you know, it's interesting if you're doing a dating app show.
Yeah. Or if you're trying to compete with Tinder and come up with your own options.
But wait to where this goes.
Yes.
This is the point.
Yes.
Is that all of this talk would be absolutely, you know, aside from the fact that I'm staring at like the sword, the pistol.
Why are women digging this?
Why are we, like, what? I got a guitar.
My jazz master.
Got the cool guitar here and my 2 weapons.
Yeah.
I'm a grown man. But continue.
Would rate 8. Men that are on average rated 8 to 10 are deemed average, and for men the bell curve is normal. Like the average woman is average.
Yeah.
The ugly woman is ugly. The beautiful woman is beautiful. For women, almost all guys, 80% of men they deem unworthy or unattractive.
So
but I don't know if the solution to this then is to say engage in it. Perhaps the solution is
pause it.
Get
So in
away
other
from,
words, I think what he's saying with those statistics, he was sort of like talking about them, is that women reject more men on these apps than men reject women.
Because there's more men on the apps.
That could be part of it. It could also be that, like,
women are bitches.
That could be part of it.
Feminism,
but it could also be just like, it may be a little bit scarier for women to sort of just look at a picture of a dude and go like, yeah, I'm going to go meet that guy.
In the city, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to go meet that guy at a, it's somewhere down the road.
I'm going to give that guy my phone number.
It could be like, I need
And what I will say with my experience on these dating apps, there were a lot of times where I would say maybe a man like appears to be attractive, but would send me a message that was disgusting. I would not have rated them in the 8 to 10 range, and maybe would have gone lower because of the context.
Just because he's not in your bell curve of acceptable
no, and that's my favorite part too. Is the I know, like, the men are the rational ones. They fall along a natural bell curve pattern. I mean, the bell curve is natural in all instances. Let's be real, right? That's what Tim Pool, they kind of have that association. So the women are completely unnatural and honestly hysterical. The men follow along the natural pattern of attractiveness along a strict grading scale. And the woman that just shoots up at the end. I mean, how emotional do you have to be to go through that process?
And again, this stuff would be like, it wouldn't be worth our time if we didn't get to this part.
To this then is to say engage in it. Perhaps the solution is get away from these areas full of debauchery, go out to smaller areas and find something more wholesome. If cities have embraced this culture to this degree, then perhaps the solution is to recognize that and get away from it.
You can, but that does not necessarily save you, because that woman is still going to be open to the globalized sexual marketplace. She still might go to college in an area where she might still go to university where being promiscuous and everything is encouraged. At University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, someone sent me a picture of this. They're literally giving girls honey packs and condoms.
Y'all are
What?
Sorry.
What?
Doesn't this help their chances if women are promiscuous? I mean, am I crazy?
Well,
they're taking advantage of men.
There's a 2-part problem. Women are being promiscuous, but not with them. That's the problem.
You're right.
That's the problem. But like, you understand, like they'll talk all this data and about how there's some societal problem, but the bottom line is, what we're hearing is a group of guys who want women to behave in a way that is in is consistent with the way that they should behave. And like they've already started off this conversation with like women are becoming more successful and independent, and therefore it is a problem for men. Well, maybe the problem has been that men have been acculturated to treat women in a certain way that was reliant on the essentially the oppression of women who could not have, whose options were limited by society to the benefit of men who would, you want a credit card? Well, you're gonna have to marry me before you get your credit card.
Yep.
You want to eat? You
You want to pursue your dreams? Actually, just kidding. You can't do that either because then you just need to serve me.
Forget the distribution though. Like for every time one of these, sluts is going and having sex with somebody who isn't these guys, there's also a guy doing it. So why are we enforcing this?
We know this about Jordan Peterson. His whole problem with that you have the top tier. Remember, he said this to Joe Rogan.
Right.
You have the top tier men.
But aren't
having sex with all the women?
But aren't those
therefore
really
there's the
promiscuous guys?
incels?
Yeah, but they're Chads.
Those guys must be super promiscuous. Why aren't we?
Well,
going after them?
it doesn't. They're allowed to be. The women aren't.
And that's when Rogan said, like, aren't you saying basically that we need to provide equality?
Because if this is the case and these guests are who they say they are, they're the ones sleeping with all the women, which I
Well,
don't think is what's happening.
They don't. And I also just want to say too. Notice how Tim works backwards from him, like moving to West Virginia and the compound.
Right,
It's like
exactly.
in cities, it's so disgusting and depraved. Come to my compound, and you'll have sushi, and then maybe we can.
I just want to say
have a
I
good
was
time.
being ironic and verbalizing them when I said the word sluts.
Okay.
Just so in case people
I think we got it.
They're literally giving girls honey packs and condoms.
Y'all are just thinking too short term and too self-focused in my opinion. Like, so
right on, bro.
I'm thinking in generations, right? Like, how long did it take us to get to this point as a society? All the things which a lot of it's true, and you cannot argue with a lot of the points just made. 100%.
Centuries.
It's a big. I wouldn't say centuries. I would say maybe overall, but you look at the past, 50 years or so, and you can see the writing on the wall of what has happened to the nuclear family, what's happened to society,
Absolutely.
and the way women are viewed, and the whole deal. And so
Pause it.
the
Let's just
solution
be
to
clear.
me,
I mean, it really, we could probably bring this all the way back to when they got the vote. And then the whole thing where,
Slippery
50
slope.
years, it's true, like 55 years ago, my mom could not get a credit card in her name. You could not vote in the city of Worcester under your maiden name well into like the 70s. I imagine maybe it doesn't happen in other places, but I imagine that was the case. We could go on and on about, you could not, there was no legal concept of rape in the context of a marriage. A wife did not have the legal right to say no to sex. These are the things that they're bemoaning. Also, some progress in terms of like equal pay and educational and occupational opportunities.
Birth control, yeah.
And birth control, of course.
Absolutely.
the way women are viewed, and the whole deal. And so the solution to me is a generational one. And what it is that when the high value men demand something different and are open to something different and saying, you know what, this Instagram, like, let me fly you out to Bali.
Real quick. Are the high value men in the room right now? Go ahead, brother.
And saying, you know what, this Instagram, like, let me fly you out to Bali on my private jet deal is no longer attractive to them because they have a higher standard that they're setting for themselves. Hopefully my sons, who will be,
the women are not attracted to that anymore, is what you're saying?
I'm saying the men are saying we want something different. We don't want the Instagram hoe that I can fly in overnight just to have a quick,
That is biology.
That's never happening.
That's biology.
With all due respect, that's never.
No, but hold on.
Yeah,
Like,
go ahead.
I agree a lot with what he's saying. Imagine if women are only looking at the top 8, 9, 10 of men.
Yeah.
If guys like you just started shaming women, do they? You know who's paying for OnlyFans, right? It's lower quality
100%.
guys.
Yeah, 100%.
So if high quality dudes who got really nice watches and pull up in a Bugatti, and this woman's like, "Yeah, I want to come hang with you," and he'll say, "Yeah, what's your body count?" And he goes, how dare you ask me that? I don't want no hoe in my car. And he takes off.
Yeah.
Now she's embarrassed. She got shut down. And more women are going to say, if I want a high value man, because only the guys are going to come after me are going to be high value.
So maybe
let's
flip
be real here.
maybe
Okay, we're
flip
gonna turn this into the Dreamcast.
Yeah.
It's the Dreamcast now. Let's all
Yo,
but
let's be real here. As men, we gotta be honest here, bro. We smashing whatever's possible, and if they're bad,
Speak
you know
for
we're gonna say no.
yourself.
Yes.
Speak
All
for
right,
yourself, bro.
Let's pause it for a
But
second.
so the plan is to save
High value men like you guys.
high value men like you guys.
Not like Tim.
Tough guys.
What you got to do is you've got to shame these women that you connect with after you ask them how many people they've slept with.
Yeah. You know what happens when you start asking women questions like that is they no longer look at you like you are a high value man. They start to look at you like you're some kind of reaction.
Dude, he's got a Bugatti.
That's
He's
the
got a
thing.
Bugatti.
See, these manosphere guys have no idea what women
I
want,
love that
and
shit.
that's what's amazing. Like, oh, a Bugatti, a trip to Bali so you can bang. Who do I know that does this? Does anybody know that? Nobody lives in this world. High quality men. You know what?
On
Actually, I
Instagram.
would find that to be incredibly showboaty. This is probably why Tim didn't get anywhere with me. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. I actually find that behavior to be a little bit reprehensible. It shows a general kind of commitment to capitalism, to superficiality that would not designate me to or cause me to designate them as a high quality
Sounds
man.
like somebody's got a high body count. That's what it sounds like.
I need more shame.
The idea that a grown man would say, the high quality man comes out, he's got the Rolex, he's got the Bugatti.
Yeah.
This is honestly like the talk of a 10-year-old. This is Saul and I walking down the street and seeing like a Ferrari.
Yeah.
Oh God. Oh, I can't. So cool. Like the arrested development that is associated with this, which incidentally they believe is completely separate from why the women don't want them.
Yeah, it's your personality, guys. It's your personality. That's why the women are not interested.
Yeah, it's because you fixate on things like body count.
But again, the mentality that we need to humiliate and shame women to make them conform to the way that we want them to be. And then they dress it up with all this data they have from Tinder.
And it's just slut shaming.
It's
just slut shaming.
And guys will do whatever, but women, we got to get on them and talk about what's your body count. And then if they say like something above 10, we have to peel out in our Bugatti right in front of their face.
What, you don't like this?
Yeah, well, you're not getting into the Lambo if
Yeah.
Doors are locked.
the guys
Inside
who
doors are locked.
I'm out to go sleep with a virgin. Like,
I love the high quality guys who essentially assess themselves based on their Bugatti and their Rolex. They don't want some Instagram hoe. It's just.
I mean, how pathetic is it as Tim though? One, I appreciate that he understands that he's not one of these guys.
Yes.
You know, that's actually like a sign of, healthy self-awareness. But to like sort of ask them, can you guys start shaming the women so they stop sleeping with all you guys and let it trickle down a little bit is delicious.
It's so
Why don't you guys respect the free marketplace?
And just to give you guys an idea of like what Fresh and Fit show is like, they just like invite 4 women onto like stage at an event and just literally like say to them, "You're inferior to us. Like defend that position. Like defend that. Why
Which
are we
one of
not-"
those guys are they? Who's who here?
So I'm pretty sure this is Fresh and the other one's Fit.
Fresh and Fit had they had
I
Nick
can't-
Fuentes on it.
Yeah, they're kind of like really,
Yeah.
really right wing coded as well.
yeah.
But then Jason Howerton, funnily enough, he's an entrepreneur who was one of the chief architects behind the astroturfing effort of Richmond, north of Richmond, by Oliver Anthony.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, and just their conception of like what they think women is inherently misogynistic. Like you have to be able to be tricked into having sex with me. Like you can't know me we can't have a relationship of equals, which might be more attractive.
Just look at this fancy stuff I got.
Yeah, look at all the like this car, and I'm tricking you.
Can you imagine what kind of apartment I have if I have a car like this?
I'm tricking you with my money, right? And like that's the only thing they think women want because that's an inherently misogynistic view of who women are. They're not. multidimensional people who have dreams, who have like laughter, who have goals, who have weaknesses. They're just there to like be a money sponge for the high value men, and that's what's so pathetic about all of it.
Can you put a Bugatti up on the screen, please? Just so I can.
Oh yeah, you need
If I saw a man, this would like if a guy posed with this on a dating app, I would swipe. What's the other one? Left is the bad one. I would swipe left because I would never want someone. And I think there are a lot of girls like this because this is a hallmark of the exact dynamic that they're. Yeah, give me a break. First of all, cars are bad investments.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
That one?
Yeah, it wouldn't do it for me.
Be on. You're
not going to lie
No,
about your
no.
body
Get
count?
back to the one with the T roof.
Damn. If I saw a guy driving like this, I'm like,
do
I'm
the beige
90% sure you watch Andrew Tate, so I'm swiping left.
What about the beige one?
The beige one's ugly as hell.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Two-tone. I gotta say, I like the one with the no top. What is the convertible?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You got to get one of those and pose on the right stuff with it.
It's not even
attract
like
a high volume.
It's not even something affordable, like by some kind of like.
How much is a car like that?
$600,000 probably, maybe 300, but I think it's over $500,000.
Yeah.
I mean, it was at one point. I don't know if it still is the fastest production car on earth.
Yeah, but
which is why they named it. Like
honestly, guys being into cars, most women don't like that at all.
it's kind of like that's a very like you failed if you've had to spend like $60,000 on like an M3 in order to get any kind of woman to look to you like that, and then the nature of that relationship, I don't think it's going to be very happy.
I will concede that I recently found myself saying that I probably am going to go for a sunroof on the next Subaru I get.
Whoa.
Damn. Look out, ladies.
Now, that may be a couple of years off.
Try to falsify your body count cards that the Trump administration is going to be forcing
better
out.
better drop the body counts. Going to be riding underneath the sunroof.
Looking for maidens, unspoilt by the world.
Check this out. Check this out. Check this out.
Even as a joke.
There you go.
You press the button and it went back?
Yeah.
Wow. High value women,
Pulling
line
to the
up.
club. Hello, miss. What's your body count?
Guess who just became an 8?
Yeah. Does any woman here not know how to use a condom? Because get in if you.
I want you as inexperienced and as impressionable as possible. I mean,
A very fumbling experience.
why aren't other women interested?
Oh my God.
Guys
All
like
right.
you need to
Let's
shame the women for us.
Oh my God, they should keep if they
She
keep
was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
And that didn't work. And she went after some Chad on Tinder instead.
I said the subtext as text. Unfortunately.
Unbelievable. Folks, we have gone way too far.
Okay. In many ways.
Geez. Dave from Ireland says, where's Matt getting a Bugatti for $600K? A new Chiron starts in at $3.3 million.
Oh, wow. Inflation is out of control.
I
they might have been over $1 million originally.
I don't really think anyone here.
I just don't
cares.
understand, even if you have that much money,
Yeah.
like how do you justify dropping that kind of money on a car?
That's the thing, yeah.
It's not even a good like it depreciates in value, isn't
And
that?
you're not
No,
gonna
but
get a
you don't
Koenigsegg?
care. I mean, if you have $1 billion,
I guess.
you're not buying anything for an investment per se.
But how many guys on Tinder have $1 billion?
Well, also, yeah, exactly. You gotta. That's like that would be Tinder Premium.
Yeah. No, what you do is you rent one of these things and then take your Tinder pics for it.
Yeah. It's like that company that allows you to sit in a private jet for an
It's
hour
so
and
funny,
take
yeah.
photos and then put it on your Instagram. That's literally what those guys think like women want.
Yeah. Have you heard of that, Sam? They have like, it looks like you're inside a private jet, but it's just on a sound stage.
Mhm.
And
You rent it
go
out and you
there
take photos.
and be like, travel, not get on my level.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to say that like a picture there were 3 things that I would automatically swipe against.
Left.
Somebody who is pictured with a car, because some women do that. someone who is sitting in a private jet.
Yep.
Because I'm
Yeah,
like,
same.
I'm not going to be there for you.
Yeah.
Not my lifestyle.
you're gonna
disappointed.
day one is gonna be you're gonna be unhappy.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and the third is partner in crime.
Oof.
If you say I'm looking for a partner in crime,
Oh, okay. I mean, I would be a little bit more flexible on that one.
I am not a criminal.
Yeah. You don't want to be called. You don't want to be besmirched. I understand that.
I don't
You know,
want.
and when I
'Cause
say
that's also like, am I going to trust somebody who's going to
Yeah.
like that? They're just using me as probably
An accomplice.
oh, you be the lookout, and then I am the one who gets arrested.
And I'll say, the fancy cars or private jets, like I just feel like, I don't know. You're like, you don't share my values, and you're also probably gonna cheat. That's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, I remember like I'd seen like if you have like 4 out of 5 your pictures is like at a club in a club dress, I'm just like, I don't think we have the same lifestyle.
Yeah, right.
Like,
I know,
attractive or whatever.
Yeah.
All right. Surplus value theory. Yes, Joe the plumber passed away. You guys know who he is?
He was
remember Joe the plumber?
The sort of stand-in for the common man in 2012, right?
Well, no, 2008. I think he came up to Obama. Was it 2008 or 2012?
Oh yeah, it was the Palin one. I think you're right.
I didn't even remember he was a real
Yeah.
guy. I
He
just
was
thought
a
that
real
was
guy.
like
No.
okay.
He was a real guy. I mean, I don't think he was actually like, I think he had a plumbing company. I'm not sure. I can't remember the
gotcha.
details. All right, 5 of these. Jonathan Armstead, if you were elected to an office, what would you get sworn in on? People usually pick anything, a holy book, the Constitution, even a Captain America book. I think this question we should ask in debates. We just need to weed out the theocratic authoritarians. New Jersey mailman.
Man, maybe.
If mental health is such an issue with Americans, then why does the GOP feel the need to work so hard? It's easier for people with mental health issues to get weapons. Good news. Jesse just blocked me on Twitter. What a coward. All right, 5 of these. Matthew Film Guy. Sam, am I in your will? And if so, what do I get? Well, you're going to get the mug you sent me and the fan that doesn't work, but I do appreciate the and what was the other thing he sent me? Well, you send me all sorts of gifts, Matthew. It was something else too. Oh, he sent me the beard trimming bib. Thank you. It was very weird.
Oh, who did?
Matthew Film Guy.
Oh,
But you're going to
Stuff
get
you can't
those.
sell?
Yeah, that's it. I don't like. I don't know what's going on with that. That was weird. I haven't gotten Matthew's not like sending me gifts on a regular basis. Oh, I also think Ronald Reagan sent me something. I gotta because it's
gotta
weird.
check that out.
Nick Nitro. Hey Sam, if your staff unionized, would you voluntarily recognize or call for a vote? I would bring in a whole team of people
To fuck with us.
to break this union so quickly.
Yeah, well, we normally support unions. It's just not the right environment, I think.
I yes, unionize. Let's do it.
Okay. Might be a 2024 campaign season.
There you go. No, I would voluntarily, of course.
Should skip to Wildcat Strike.
That was Michael's strategy.
We're just doing individual sort of.
That was just Michael's strategy. Not trying to form a union, just Wildcat strikes. What are your demands? Keep striking.
Keep you on your toes.
502 Drew. Did you all see where Jordan Peterson tweeted at Mehdi Hassan and said he isn't brown and is
Yes.
technically Caucasian?
Just shows
The
that whiteness is
Jordan
a construct.
Peterson, the former psychologist, former accredited psychologist, now.
Did you guys cover all
Oh,
that?
certainly.
Yeah.
Yes.
The thing, like, apparently, I have free speech, but if you're a member of a professional organization, there's things called ethics.
Yeah.
So Canada's dead for free speech.
The same thing that allowed me to actually have some credibility in writing my books and providing my advice now apparently has standards.
Apparently, I'm embarrassing them for some reason, making their organization look bad.
It was all well and good when it was actually bringing in the cash.
Yeah, it's so funny though. He's like, the way he tried to characterize it is like, I criticized a local representative, I criticized Justin Trudeau, and if you actually look at the criticism, it's like calling a trans representative a thing, calling another guy who worked for Trudeau a prick. It's
Yeah.
like, Okay, man.
And it was,
I don't think it's.
and he was supposed to just take some sort of course, essentially, to correct his vitriolic conduct.
Calling other professionals.
I need to be sent to a re-education.
Yep. Did you hear that he said that?
I must have seen the clip. Or
It's something like that. Yeah.
Surplus value theory. I'm tuning in. Oh, we already did that. All right, 3 more. Vatoff. Women don't think a high-quality dude is a dude with a nice watch and Bugatti. Women think a high-quality dude is a dude with a nice personality and with or without a Subaru.
And someone who respects them. Yeah.
I just think like these things about what the dating apps do, they definitely like, and the pictures of vacations. I think that's like a class stratifying thing of, but like, I also hear, I also talk to women on like any of those guys in that studio, and they also say like, yeah, like this causes a level of frivolity among people that you match with, and it's like not great for anybody.
Yeah.
Penny in New Mexico. Emma and Clan were great. It's nice to have you back, Sam. Thank you.
Oh, and dating apps are not great in smaller towns. I'll just tell you that too.
Oh boy, yeah. And Mike from Bavaria. Some say the issue is the demise of the Nuckier family. I say that's too short-sighted. The true problem is the demise of the Cole family. And the final I am of the day. Thomas from Texas. Am I a virgin for not knowing WTF a honey pack is? What is a honey pack?
I don't know either.
I figured it was like something that gives you like a condoms and maybe breath mints.
Not like a honey trap.
No, the guy said a honey pack. They give it out to you at college.
Oh, that's probably with sexual like.
All I see is a pillow website. Okay.
I
here.
imagine it's like here's some condoms. Trying to get pregnant in your freshman year. of
Urban
college.
Dictionary says that these are it's like a sex drug. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No shame against people who use Viagra medicine or whatever.
Go for it.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Bradley, Matt, Emma. Great job today. Folks, we will see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my